Either way, and anything he might do.
Then I would say would inure to my special private gain loss, because if you violate the agreement, you go to your loss. And then right on the bottom, and that makes, right there.
Lawsuit.
Then a lady came up and told him how horrible he was, and they were sorry. And then a third man comes up and and by that time, me and Thomas had a buddy by the arms taking him back. He said, "Don't worry, we got you back." And we walked and I said, "Y'all be going back to take them."
She handed me an extra thing. I'm supposed to give two of them.
But I intend to go to the family jail, but I'm glad I ain't called.
Yeah, let's negotiate. Last year I was on the semifinal. The game was very I was on and I saw it on the red. I saw the girl say, I appreciate it. I saw the guys call me a couple of times. He said, that girl was out. He said, I was wondering, and he said, we turned around, I saw who the official was at third base. I said, yeah, that's him. Appreciate it. Do you think it'll be next week? I called him say. You saw Hey man, how's it going? Good. You always come dressed up, made me feel bad.
I would never.
I'm just trying to make him feel good. Now, do you dress for work like that every day? Work? Well, then you do just do this for fun, don't you? I didn't know if your clients expected that. Yeah. Well, then you need a couple times for that. That almost sounds like VS does. He's building everything virtual spiritual.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
But the firm
Yeah.
represented you.
I have to sign an agreement with them and say I won't.
And then you hope it all works out like that. Yeah, no kidding.
I see boogers everywhere.
Not really. I have a hard time with it. I just really I couldn't
Next week.
I'm not going to give them much longer than 55.
Waiting on him. Waiting on him.
Are we the only four going to be?
Looks like I know the new guy's not going to be here either.
He missed the last meeting too, didn't he?
Out of town.
Is it? Does he travel for work or something?
No, he's retired.
He's retired.
He may travel from Grand Younger or such. They put Frank and John's name tags out, so they must be going to be here.
They may show up. We got enough to go.
Probably be young, because I got to recuse myself from the first one.
And we won't have enough. He has to recuse himself on the first one. Not for that item.
Maybe one of them will come in. Or maybe not. But no, dude, we don't.
I guess you could push it.
We're gonna have
Somebody
to.
shows, are they supposed to be?
Yeah.
They're signed.
You're talking about item number one?
Well, it's number 3. The first two we're going to hear.
Right.
1 and 2 are going to
We're
get
going to hear.
We're going to have to wait on that one. Just
If we don't have a quorum.
We can push that in the meeting.
We can push it back in here whenever someone shows up. It'll be.
Let's take it out.
Karen should know if the other two said anything.
Karen, you ready?
The two coming? Are the other two coming?
Okay. Are you ready? Okay, if you would please stand and join me with pledge and identification. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would, let's pray. Father, Lord, we thank you for this day and all your many blessings. We thank you for each one who's here tonight. And we ask now that we conduct your business, that you would help us to do so in a manner that's pleasing to you and in the best interest of the citizens of Walton County. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We'll go ahead and open the meeting. And just a couple of items real quick before we get started. A reminder, if you haven't done so already, please either turn your phones off or put them on silent. That way we don't get interrupted too many times. Also, we will have a 9 o'clock time certain end to the meeting. Any items that have not been heard by 9 o'clock will be moved to the next regularly scheduled meeting. Keep the noise down. There's a lot of people here. If you start murmuring amongst yourselves out in the audience, it makes it very difficult for us to hear up here what's going on. If you have a conversation you have, please step out into the outside out there to do that. Okay, the first item we deal with is the minutes from last meeting.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion?
I will second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Mr. Carpenter?
Good evening, Commissioners. Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department. We have some agenda updates, if we could take care of those. We have a request to continue on 3 items. The first of those would be item number 1 under legislative, the crossings. We have a request to continue it to the June 8th Planning Commission meeting to provide more time to work with the neighborhood.
Commissioners?
Motion to continue.
Second.
Motion taking us to the next meeting, or the June?
The June 8th
June
meeting.
8th meeting? Okay. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have the same request on a companion project, the Chandler LSA. That's item number 2 under legislative. They've asked for some additional time to work with the neighborhood, and we request that be continued to June 8th, 5 o'clock in this room.
Commissioners?
Motion to continue.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And then, Mr. Chairman, under our QJ items, on number 7, Piper's Place, we have a request to continue to the June 8th meeting at 5 o'clock in this location.
Commissioners?
Motion to continue. Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, I have one request with regard to the order of the agenda, and this is a request to move item number 10, a small-scale amendment being proposed by Regional Utilities to the beginning of the QJ item list. And our justification for this is a small-scale amendment. They're proposing some additional infrastructure that will serve all of South County. And they can't file for their development order until we get the small-scale amendment approved. And given the time frame for that, we requested that be moved up to the beginning of the QJ to ensure that it gets heard tonight.
I have no problem with that, Commissioners.
We need a motion for that?
No, you don't. You just,
We'll move that up to the first item, TJ.
Thank you, sir. And our first item tonight is the Hicks large-scale amendment. Bob Baranti has reviewed that project, and he will introduce it for us.
Mark?
well, it's a legislative item. Oh, and we have an announcement. We have a recusal by Mr. Perry on this item. He has a conflict.
Good evening. Bob Baranti from planning staff. Mr. Hicks is applying for a future land use large-scale amendment to go change 198.17 acres from estate residential to industrial. The project is located approximately 3.5 miles east of the intersection of Rock Hill Road and US Highway 331 on the north side of Rock Hill Road. Before I get into the case, I'm going to get into some history and some things that are here currently. On your map, you could up there. It's not in your packet, but there's. Can you go back one more? There you go. Thank you. The parcel itself is a larger parcel. It's 300 plus acres. So they're out of that total acreage, they're asking for 198.17 acres to be considered for industrial. The rest will remain estate residential. And you can see on the map, sorry, my pointer doesn't work on the maps up there. There will be a buffer from Rock Hill Road to the proposed future land use change line, 1,568 feet on the south. On the northwest, there'll be 1,300 square feet of buffer that will remain estate residential. To the top of this project, you see in the pink purple is an industrial area, which is the former county borrow pit. It's Mr. Perry's property. Also, if you look on this map, and it's also included in your handouts today, on both the east side of this property and the west side of this property in the estate residential is the Bear Preservation Conservancy land. So that is also in your presentation. NICUS, educational. And then also, in doing our due diligence further today, we've determined that this site already has an active natural plant matter, trees, grass, dumping area permit through the state. It also has a active recreational pond extension permit out there. Now, the dirt dug out for the pond must stay on the property. It cannot be used because that would require a DO to approve that. So that has to remain there. This property also, in checking today with our Public Works environmental people, they stated that if Mr. Hicks is planning on operating a borrow pit or mining operation of 5 acres or larger, he would be subject to the mine reclamation requirements under Florida statute. And also he would have to have a active draft reclamation project submitted with the project, and you also would have to have it on there. And he would also need an NIPDES permit prior to clearing over an acre. And there's already over an acre there that's cleared. Okay, so I'll move in. If there's no questions on those, I'll move into the.
Before you go over an acre cleared, is that a violation of something of some kind?
Well, I hadn't been able to determine that. I hadn't got the email back from the state on that yet. It wouldn't be our violation, it would be the state's. And like I said, he has a yard trash permit for a processing facility. Some of you that have served longer on the board remember this came to you late 2012, went to the BCC in January of 13 for a request for excavation. That request was denied. The applicant here today is to request, as I said, change to industrial. The environmental, there's no identified environmental issues by our staff. There have been questions about the resource damages to the creeks. The only ramification the county has is if there was an issue, it would become a code complaint and code would follow up. But it could also be complained to the state and the state would investigate that. So just wanted you to have that in mind before I turn it over to the developer. Do you have any questions of me?
Commissioners?
Is there a current code enforcement action on this property?
There were older ones. Currently, there are no active violations.
So it's not a violation of the code for them to be clearing land for a borrow pit?
That land has been cleared for a number of years.
Okay.
And it was most likely part of the prior violation issue that went forward.
And those were all settled.
As of today, there's no active violations.
You don't know what the settlement was or what happened with them?
Whoa, no, the cases were closed a while back. So this is the applicant's attempt to come back and get it into compliance, but this time requesting industrial.
Commissioners, anybody else have anything? All right.
Now, there was flooding issue, but that flooding started on to the north and went on to the property to the south. And in that settlement, there was nothing mentioned about land use change. It was purely for the flood damage. And I will turn, Dean is here to answer any further questions.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Dean Burgess with Emerald Coast Associates. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Hicks, the landowner. And I think Bob did a good job of introducing the project, giving you a little bit of history on it. I'd like to elaborate a little further. This has been a historical borrow pit, dirt pit. There have been some code violations in the past, and I think that some of those violations may have complicated the previous request. There is an agreement in place, a consent order that Mr. Hicks is adhering to and abiding by. In light of that, we thought that it was a good time to come in and request that now that things are in order and allow this property to be properly designated for what's already out there. It's a dirt pit. I believe at one point it was actually a county pit, and Mr. Hicks purchased it, continued to utilize it as a pit, and it's in that's what brought it to the condition it's in today. So it is our first step in getting it in compliance, and obviously the future steps would be receiving the proper development order to continue utilizing it as a dirt pit.
So it is currently being used as a dirt pit?
It is currently not being excavated at all, in accordance with the consent order that Mr. Hicks agreed to.
Commissioners, any questions?
What's the proposed or the planned use should this go through?
The planned use would be to continue utilizing it as a active dirt pit and get the proper permits to do so. The southern portion of the land, which of course is not subject to this request, but I feel it's important to the understanding of the project, would be held as estate residential. I'll try to speak up. That's this land on the southern portion of it between the road and the request tonight. That would be held as family land, allow them to build, his kids to build homes and so forth along the road there.
What's south of this property, Dean?
There's residential properties to the south, adjacent to the road, and they are similar in depth to what we're providing. And then there is agricultural land that I believe is also part of Nakusi Plantation.
Does any part of what we're talking about is 198 acres, does any part of that abut the Nakusi land?
As Bob said, this southwestern edge does, and the eastern edge here does. This is an irregular shape because it follows the wetland line. Yes, to the east, and a small portion of the western sides too.
Okay.
How much of this property is wetlands?
Roughly less than a quarter. Basically, what's shaded here in gray is wet, and the remainder of the property is uplands.
Yeah, the audience can't see the same map that you're pointing. Can't hear it.
You can't hear?
No, can't hear the board. I can hear him, but not you.
Okay, I'll be closer to the microphone. The Nakusi land is all conservation, is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
And as part of the development order, there are buffers that are required from conservation land that we would be required to adhere to.
How big a buffer?
I'm going off memory. I believe it's 75 feet.
Where exactly would your planned or thought out borrow pit be?
I have not planned that out at this point. We haven't worked on plans for the pit and orientation of it at this point.
Where's the current pit that's there?
In the aerial, you can see the white areas, yes, sir, are where the excavation has occurred.
Would it be reasonable to think that's where you're going to continue to
Yes, I mean that would.
just expand that?
Those would be the areas that would be expanded. We have wetlands to be concerned with and staying out of there. So yes, those areas would be the logical place to expand, as well as the eastern side there. There's an upland portion there that would be expanded into.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Burgess?
Not this time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have several people who have signed up to speak on this item, as well as a significant packet we all received, so. I'll go in the order I have them here.
Mr. Chairman, let me just do one thing procedurally. The staff wanted its report put into evidence. Yes. I would recommend you accept it into
Can
evidence.
we enter the staff report into evidence?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Accepted.
I'm sorry.
Matthew Oresco? And while we get started here, just if you would, everybody, please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Let everybody talk all day, we'll never get out of here tonight. So, go ahead.
I'm Dr. Matt Oresco. I'm here representing Ngozi Education, which is the adjacent landowner to the Hicks parcel on the east and west sides. I'm also the director of Nakusi Plantation, which is a 54,000 acre tract of conservation land in the county. And we are opposed to this land use change, and I want to just go through a few items on why we're opposed to it. You probably recall that a similar land use change has been mentioned for extraction, was requested by Mr. Hicks in 2013, and it was denied. Now they're back again asking you to approve an even more intense land use change to industrial. One of our primary objections to this proposed land use change is that it does not meet the comp plan criteria for industrial because it's not compatible with a significant area of adjacent land uses, and that being our land. Our border with the Hicks parcel is about 1 mile on the east side and about 0.4 of a mile on the west side. All of our land is protected in perpetuity by conservation easement. it's conservation land. No development is allowed. It's not estate residential. That's an error that needs to be changed. But it's conservation land because it's protected in perpetuity. You should have a copy of the conservation easement that I provided to staff today, as well as a map that shows the extent of our conservation land. The conservation easement is recorded in the Walton County Public Records. It alarms me that I did not see this reported anywhere in the application or the supporting documents. As you know, the comp plan policy L1.2.27 for location states that industrial will be, quote, assigned to areas which can support intense uses, provide extensive buffers to shield for adjacent land uses, and that have sufficient infrastructure to support a proposed industrial use. These areas typically are not encumbered by environmentally sensitive lands, conservation easements, or habitats that are intended for preservation. In our opinion, the Hicks parcel clearly does not comply with the location criteria for industrial as stated in the comp plan. The state of Florida purchased the conservation easement on this land because it considered it environmentally sensitive and they wanted to see it preserved. The area of our conservation land north of Rock Hill Road protects rare natural communities such as seepage slopes and wetlands and tributaries that drain to the north to Bruce Creek. In looking at the applicant's map of the area of the proposed land use change, it's amazing to me that industrial goes right up to our conservation land on both sides. And, 75 feet of a buffer to me is not an extensive buffer as stated in the comp plan. Lastly, I'm concerned that the application is very vague on exactly what sorts of activities will be conducted on the property other than sand extraction that warrants the industrial land use designation. Without much more in-depth details and analysis, how could they possibly unequivocally state that wetlands, soils, or groundwater won't be affected by the activities? We just don't know what they're planning other than sand extraction. This application in the analysis is much too cursory and incomplete to recommend approval. We hope that you will recommend a denial of the application. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. The conservation easement is not on the property owned by Mr. Hicks?
No, it's next to it, yeah.
Adjacent to
It's
both
the adjacent.
On both sides.
east
that's
and
right.
west.
And just to be clear,
Yes.
in your opinion, 75 feet is not enough?
No.
What
What would be required? I'm just curious, as far as a buffer.
I would say 500 feet. I mean, that's extensive. I mean, the comp plan says extensive, and clearly 75 or 100 feet is not. It should be much more than that. But I think 500 feet at minimum.
On those conservation lands Nicusi owns on either side, what's primarily there? I mean, is there species or what type of plants or species are common there?
On one side, there's a lot of seepage slope, which is where groundwater kind of seeps out of the hillside, so it's very sensitive. There's pitcher plants and wiregrass. And on the east side, we've done longleaf pine restoration. There's gopher tortoises on that track on the east side, and extensive wetlands as well.
Thank you.
Is this one of the parcels that y'all been relocating gophers to?
Not this, no, not that. It's too
So they're
close.
naturally occurring?
Yeah, they're naturally occurring in that area.
Anybody else have any questions for this? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What's that? Janine? Janice or Janine Smith? I apologize for not getting your name right if I got it wrong. So.
That's okay. Hi, my name is Janice Smith. I'm one of many residences that are directly affected by this change that Mr. Hicks is requesting. And right now, we all oppose it. We have children, we have pets, we have gardens, we have wells, none of which we want affected by what Mr. Hicks is proposing to do. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Frank Jackson.
Hello, my name's Frank Jackson. I live on Rock Hill Road. I'm opposed to this zoning change from one thing, estate residential to industrial. That's quite a jump. And like the people before me said, we have families, children, wells, animals, gardens. We'd like to keep everything safe. And being as Mr. Hicks has a bad track record of following the rules, he might not like me saying that, but it's true. I oppose this his request.
Thank you, sir. Robert Hudson.
For the record, my name is Bob Hudson, Hudson.
You took me for a loop there putting Robert on this sign-in sheet, Bob.
I thought I put Bob. I have a couple of questions for Dean, if it's okay. Some of you are aware that I served previously as a board member for our commissioner for the South Walton Mosquito Control District. And we maintain ditches that head to the bay. Mm-hmm. At one time, we had an issue with Mr. Hicks, who was taking tree limbs, grinding them up, chipping them, mm-hmm. and then had a plant that was dyeing them, painting them, and that was flowing into our drainage ditch, which headed to the bay. We do not own those ditches other than by prescriptive easement. And when we contacted Mr. Hicks and asked him to move those away from those ditches, we found out that we needed to get the EPA involved in doing that. It's my understanding that when he moved that equipment, he moved it to this location. If it's operating and there are wetlands and if there are streams there, you need to make sure that that operation does not violate and then flow into water tables, wells, and things of that nature. So I think his statement was their environmental department had not had a chance to review that.
Right.
And I would say I would not approve it until you were sure that those things were not there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lance Laird. Lance Laird.
Yes.
Take your time, ain't no rush.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Oh, well, bear with me for my public speaking. I will hate to do public speaking. With at the funeral, I'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. All right, and first, well, I've got about three concerns about it. We live on High Lonesome Road, which is just past this property off of Rock Hill Road. And as earlier speakers have said, we have objections, and the classification to industrial, as I understand it, the agricultural land use classification of the parcel would be could be used as a landfill to store or dispose of waste, and it also includes the storing and disposal of hazardous waste as part of industrial. And the thing that caught me is that if there was a zoning was changed to allow that, he could do any one of the activities allowed under industrial land use without even notifying anybody. He could switch from land clearing debris to hazardous waste disposal without notifying anybody at the county. Then one thing about hazardous waste is, as was mentioned, that it has a potential to contaminate both surface and groundwaters, and there are streams, several streams in that parcel with the associated wetlands. All right, something I heard earlier caught my attention. The idea of their not being allowed to extract at this time, it not be an operating landfill. One of the concerns we have is noise and operation at reasonable hours. Tuesday night, one of my neighbors said he could hear track vehicles operating up to 10 o'clock at night. And my wife heard it early the next morning, as well as did I, but not as early as her. That must be what was keeping my dogs working. Why does he need to operate equipment at night? It's a bulldozer is what it sounds like, especially 2 days before this hearing. He's running at 7 o'clock again this morning, and it causes that type of noise that early in the morning. It causes our horses to spook. We have 2 registered quarter horses that we value very much, and we got 2 rescue horses from Aliquot, and it was frightening them. Running from pasture to pasture. We need to be able to allow for proper use of the property, allow him proper use of the property, while remembering that they are families and children within earshot of the pits. We need you to realize that the actions of others can adversely affect our property values and quality of life. Now, third concern I have personally is the potential for sedimentation in the streams that are on the property. The pits in this area have a notorious record for damaging streams from sediment running off the pits, filling the stream beds and causing the sand to cover the roots of trees and other wetland vegetation. It leads to the trees dying. You can look at aerial photos and see where, if you look back to previous years and then compare it to present day, you can see the mortality of the trees and the damage done to the stream systems. As a side note to the operation of the haul trucks all along Rock Hill Road is getting increasingly dangerous. With the work on Highway 331, those speeding dump trucks are forming like a continuous stream, one after another. Sometimes I walk on the side of the road there on Rock Hill Road, and it's frightening, buddy. Those trucks are all over the road, up to the edge and to the middle, and they're going so fast, it's unreal. Also, it seems that there was a recent wreck with a fatality, and all we want is for trucks to slow down and watch out for our children. In conclusion, I hope that you will consider incorporating these points in your deliberations on the pit and on that pit and others in the area. We hope you can use this action to provide more protection for our neighborhood and the environment. Perhaps, like for the speeding, more police protection could make the operation safer for us. Maybe, instead of the straight out denial, maybe y'all could condition the issuance so that he would have to provide a reporting to y'all if he was going to switch from clean fill disposal and to some sort of hazardous waste or something like
Well,
that.
I'm sure that would have to be permitted probably by the state, so we would.
Yeah, it would, but
He couldn't just do that legally.
yes, yes. We'd like to get notice if it was going to happen.
Right.
All right, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Laird. For somebody who don't like public speaking, you did quite a good job, sir. Fred and Linda Cannon?
Well, I'm Fred Cannon. I only own 5 acres. I don't own all the land Mr. Hicks has got. I don't have his money or anything else. I bought the land for my family to live on and put a home on it. Now he wants to come around and put a dump site out there and a landfill out there, which would affect my land property value and everything else. Personally, have Mr. Hicks do this next to his house and leave ours alone. Because I don't really enjoy the one him doing it out there. Just because I bought that land for my family to live on. not to have to move because the property value got dropped to the point that you can't live there any longer because somebody's hauling dirt out of just down the road from us.
How far away do you live from this property?
From his site, probably half mile maybe. I live right on the corner of High Lonesome and Rock Hill.
Okay.
And we all came in on 213 and complained about a truck, saying wanting to haul dirt out of the end of Rock Hill Road, and then had to talk to Mr. Hicks about using No Name Road, as they call it, to get back to haul it, which he conveniently piled the road up with dirt so nobody could get in there to prevent people from doing it. Now I say we ought to pile dirt up in front of his and not let him do it either. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I like to protect my children and my home. And to protect them is to deny him the right to do this. And that's the only thing I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Mark Madamba. Did I say that right?
Very good. Excellent. Ladies and gents, my name is Mark Madamba. I live directly across the street from Sandpit Road. Guess you know where that's at. And after serving in the military for most of my adult life, I decided to find a real quiet spot to hang my hat, and so I did. Everything was nice for a while. But then we decided to go into the sand business. There's gold in that sand, I'll tell you, as Mr. Perry would attest to. We have enough industrial locations in the county. We don't need any more. We don't need to have trucks traveling at the rate of speed, 55 miles an hour on that road, windy, and it bends and it goes up and down, and they cross across the center line. And you have to be very careful if you're on the oncoming direction opposite those vehicles, because once in a while, it's a very hazardous and dangerous situation. I believe there was an accident not long ago on Rock Hill that occurred, and I don't know the outcome or what the reasons were, but I would almost guarantee you it was similar to a few years ago where there was an actual death where two cars or two vehicles had collided almost in the very same spot, which is a stone's throw from where I live. So besides all of the other things that our good neighbors have mentioned, and the environmental hazards, the noise, the trucks, I'd like to rest a little bit, and if you gentlemen would bear with us and oppose this as I do and the rest of my neighbors do, we would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Jillian Wolf.
Good evening. My name is Jillian Wolf. I live at 5205 Rock Hill Road, and I have been fighting this for many, many years. Mr. Hicks seems to think that the law is not written for him. Even when he's turned down, he does whatever he wants to. And that's a matter of record. To the point that the code enforcement has just given up. I mean, you can call him now and tell him he's doing something, and they just kind of, what do you want us to do? You know. To give him carte blanche on getting not a borrow pit, but a landfill, you know, a card to get a landfill is ridiculous. We are on top of the largest aquifer in this part of the state. To risk contaminating that aquifer, if the people on the beach knew about it, because they're getting our water too, they would be up in arms. They'd be here. Excuse me. Because that's what's at stake. That's what's at stake. Our water, our peace of mind. And if you give this to Mr. Hicks, you've just shot us all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Wait a minute.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
can I just ask you a couple of questions? You said you've called code enforcement and they basically have washed their hands
They never showed up.
and
They never did anything about it.
how many times has this occurred?
I have called them over the past, since 2010, I think.
And when was the last time you called
The
them?
last time I called was last year, and I finally gave up too. But I have a tendency, sometimes I go out late at night just for a drive or something because I can't sleep. I encounter his trucks. They do not know how to stop coming out on Rock Hill Road. I had one almost run into me. And I mean, his trucks run all times. That wreck a few days ago, that wreck was early in the morning, well before 7 o'clock.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas Hicks.
My name's Thomas Hicks, 2001 Rock Hill Road. There's been a lot of comments tonight, and I want to clarify a bunch of stuff up. On the east side, the property does belong to MC Davis, and there's, when I originally cleared the land, there's a sod field there right now. We grow sod on that property. There is a big buffer on the left side. On the north side of this property, I live on the north side of this property. I live on Bruce Creek and Mill Creek. It crosses and intersects. On the west side was the old county pit, which Mr. Perry owns now. And as far as, I'm not changing and asking for the whole piece of property. I'm leaving a 200 some odd acres on the south side of the property. The lady is a little bit in mistake about the accident that recently happened on Rock Hill Road. It happened at 6:40, I believe it was, on last Thursday afternoon. My truck was coming home. He met a car that was in his lane. He was going eastbound, the car was westbound, the highway patrol, the accident, the people come back to the accident, and basically they ran him off the road, and that is a bad Rock Hill Road side, and they ran him off the road, flipped the truck over, and he died Sunday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. He'd been with me 15 years. I just want to clarify that to the lady of what happened. And that's what happened. So I'm well aware of the trucks. I have a CDL license. I drive a truck every day, and it's scary, I agree. But what I'm asking for is land use, and it was approved back in 2013 by the board. The commissioners turned it down at the BCA meeting. They did turn it down because of the circumstance. I had an attorney present that a couple of the commissioners didn't like. But anyway, that's beside the point. This is another day, another time. And Mr. Perry said, it's my neighbor, we get along. And he said a long time ago, as long as you're going by the book, as long as you're following the rules, we don't have a problem. He had to go through it. That's what I'm asking for now, is my chance, because there is an oncoming landfill, and I'll have to travel by it. I'm the only person that lives down at Brownfield Road, which is now County Pit Road. I am the only resident that live down there in the fork. So if anybody gets affected by landfill or whatever, it will be me. And I'm not trying to slow up industrial or commercial property, because you have to have some in the county, and we don't have any industrial property in the county for things. And yes, I do recycle land, a lot clearing debris. I do not lot clearing debris, landscaping debris. We have a grinder that we recycle it. I have the analysis on it. It's very high and rich after it's a year or two old. We sell some down here at Chad Holly Road. All I'm asking for is something to be right, and I was turned down and said, you can't dig without going through the process, and that's what I'm doing, going through a very time-consuming, expensive process with the topos, the environmental surveys. I've had all the things, I've met all the criteria. It's been going on for a couple of years now. So all I'm asking for is what my neighbors got, and I'm in the right location, and I'm not trying to add traffic to the road. Everybody knows is what it is right now, you know, and that's the only place that we can get dirt is Rock Hill Road. They named it Rock Hill Road, and we have dirt up there. And without Rock Hill Road, the south end would suffer, the whole county would suffer. All I'm saying, I just want to clarify some things that was mentioned, and I'm very conscious about erosion. My daughter is here. That's what she specializes in. If anybody knows in Walton County knows Alicia Hicks. That's what she does consulting with environmental issues and things. So, you know, we just want to do the right thing the right way, and that's all I'm saying, and I want to clarify all the other stuff. Has anybody got any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hicks? No, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dean, you have anything you want to add?
Very briefly, I think Mr. Hicks responded to a number of the comments. Just for a visual, outlined in blue, I don't know if you can see it, is the property Mr. Hicks owns. It's the northern 2/3 of that we're discussing today. Immediately abutting it to the north is Mr. Perry's facility, and he went through the process. It's designated industrial. The logic being we've got an abutting property that's industrial. In close vicinity over here in purple is another industrial property, and though it looks small, that's a 10-acre piece here. That's industrial as well. The point I'd like to make is dirt pits are necessary to Walton County. Mr. Hicks was very, very right. I'm in the development business, obviously, from a design end, and I hear it quite often that there's no fill dirt, or it's difficult to get fill dirt in Walton County. And developers have to go, if they don't get it from Rock Hill Road, they go to Sykes over in Panama City. Makes for longer trips on the road. In my opinion, a more severe traffic problem, because you've got longer trips of dump trucks to get to the same facilities in South Walton and even in northern Walton County. As far as design parameters, there was a lot of concerns that were offered tonight, environmental concerns primarily, and an important aspect to remember about this is not the authorization to go build. This is the first step. This is the land use change. After this, we submit for a development order for the facility that we want to build, and that is a very rigorous review process. There's an opportunity if the facility is seen to be too invasive or does not meet the code provisions, that it can be denied. It's not an open checkbook to go build what you want. This is just the first step, and I think it's a responsible step in Mr. Hicks getting this property operating under the conditions that it should be operating under as an existing dirt pit. It doesn't make sense to go dig another dirt pit elsewhere in the county when we've already got one started on this property, and it's a matter of just bringing it into compliance. So,
go ahead.
Can you address some of the neighbors' concerns about the aquifer and their wells?
Part of the development order submittal, because I've permitted a sand pit actually on Rock Hill Road, is an in-depth review of the impacts to the aquifer. We ran what's a three-dimensional groundwater model of the impacts that it would have on the aquifer, and you have to demonstrate to not only the county but DEP that you're not going to have adverse impacts. Additionally, if a landfill facility were to be requested, There's liners that are required that basically isolate the landfill material from entering the aquifer. And if anybody was at the hearing for Mr. Perry's pit, it is a very extensive review, and there's a number of checks and balances that need to be put in place before that permit's issued.
What do you say to the neighbors who bought their property based on all of this being at least estate residential, and with Nokia's basically surrounding them? They bought theirs with the assurance that they would not have to deal with this, and now you're wanting to change after they've spent their money to invest in their property. So I mean, how do we protect them? Because like one of the gentlemen, I believe it was a gentleman, said, going from estate residential to industrial is a pretty big jump. And I mean, I see all these little squares down there. I'm assuming those represent homes that people have invested their money in, and they're probably like me. They don't have the money to go buy another one.
Right. So, well, what I can offer is, if this were estate residential land that had never been previously impacted as a dirt pit, I would be sympathetic to that thought. However, this area is the old county dirt pits that have been there for 35, 40 years. The area has already been excavated and has continued over time to be excavated for this purpose. And it's with that in mind that we make this request. The idea that this is something new simply is not the case.
I think the new is the industrial usage.
Understand.
That creates a lot of concern. So. Anybody else have anything for Mr. Burgess? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak that has not had the opportunity to speak yet? Okay. Commissioners? Thoughts? I can give you mine, just since everybody is hesitating. I agree with most of these residents that are here tonight that the change from conservation residential to industrial is a great change, and it concerns me, even though I know that permitting is required and an extensive process is required. Getting that industrial land use is a big change for everybody, and I have concerns with that personally. But I think that it's particularly when you talk about the Nicosia Reservation on either side, that conservation land that's there, that will always be conservation land, and a 75-foot buffer just to me is insane. So.
Yeah, you need to have that 500-foot buffer.
Yeah, and I think something to make clear to Mr. Hicks and Mr. Burgess, as he knows, and everybody else here, we're simply here to make a recommendation to the BCC. This is not a final decision. I mean, it would still be argued, still go forth to the BCC, and a final decision be made there.
I think everyone knows that a substantial part of the south end's water comes from just about the rock and hit the wells there. So that's a substantial threat. And it concerns me that these people have invested probably their life savings in these homes. And I mean, you can say the pits are there or not, but still the land use was estate residential. And to go from estate residential to industrial is a big jump. And to say that you can just, you have more opportunity, well, that's saying that their people are going to have to come to meeting after meeting after meeting, and when, sort of like closing the barn door after the horse got out. And I don't see the point in prolonging or recommending to prolong a non-conforming land use. And if nobody else has anything to say, I'll make a motion to deny.
We have a motion.
I will second.
We have a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go ahead and we're going to take a 10-minute break. Come back in here at 10 minutes after 6, and we'll start off with item number 10.
Tell me which one it is. He got like I said, I got over the cross. They come to mind. They don't even slow down. They just come to me now because I mean they.
You're ready, man. Wow. We will call this meeting back to order. The next item on the agenda is item number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the 4 million gallon reclaimed storage tank small-scale amendment. It's a small-scale amendment being requested by Regional Utilities. We appreciate the opportunity to move this up to the beginning of this particular agenda. Bob Aranti reviewed this project, and he will introduce it.
Good evening. This site is...
Oh, hang on just a second. This is the quasi-judicial. We need to swear everybody in. If you intend to talk before the board or testify before the board on any matter that's on the quasi-judicial docket, which is the remainder of the matters, you need to stand up and raise your right hand and let me swear you in. Do each of you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
And if you would, when you come to the podium, state your name. If it would be helpful if you'd spell your last name and let us know that you have been sworn. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
My name is Bob Baronti, B-A-R-O-N-T-I. This site is basically across the street. You see the sign. It is an ongoing attempt to keep the county's water access and availability to above what the current demand is. This site is going to be for 2 4 million gallon reclaimed tank site with a small parking lot and a small building. The reason that when the Florida Community Service Corporation of Walton County, also known as Regional Utilities, bought this, when they bought the land, as it says in South Report, it was conservation. According to the comp plan, any utilities has to be in public facilities. So hence, this is the request that they are making today. There was a minor development order that mirrors this. It's already been approved, and it's waiting contingent of this getting through to the BCC, and then they will move forward. Like I said, this is Regional Utilities' attempt to provide the best service possible for the Walton County. And with that, I will turn it over to Regional Utility to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Commissioners. I am Ryan Douglas, Engineering Manager at Regional Utilities, and want to first express our thanks for y'all allowing us to move this item up on the agenda. Thank you, Matt. I have here tonight with me our President and General Manager, Melissa Pilcher, and I have Dylan Laird here with us as well, our engineer. As Bob mentioned, and he did a good job doing so, we are here to request a future land use designation amendment for the parcel across the street, 4.25 acres, to be consistent with the rest of our land use designations, which is public facilities. I have here to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner, any questions? This is just for storage tanks, that's what it's for?
That is correct, yes, sir. Two reclaimed water storage tanks. It is directly behind and contiguous with the site that has our water tank right here across the street.
I don't have any questions, y'all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have nobody who signed up to speak. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing nobody, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Commissioners?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That was a lot easier than the last one, wasn't it?
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we'll jump back up to number 4.
Thank you, Commissioners. That would be the Miramar Inn and Suites. This is a request to approve by final order, and this project was reviewed by Tim Brown, and he will introduce it.
Good evening, Tim Brown with Planning and Development. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering requesting approval to develop a 125-unit hotel with pool amenity on 3.26 acres with the future land use of Coastal Center. It's located on the south side of Highway 98, west of Ellis Road and east of Driftwood Road. As part of their request, they're also requesting a conditional use. Coastal Center is a mixed-use category. The comp plan allows a conditional use if it's under 5 acres to do one use, so their request is to do just the hotel, no other mixed-use requirements. This went to the Design Review Board last Thursday. They approved it with 3 conditions, one being color, 2 being they wanted live oaks in lieu of crepe myrtles in the 25-foot scenic corridor buffer. There's overhead power lines, so it allows for understory trees, hence the crepe myrtles, but they wanted live oaks. And they also made a condition that the parking lot lighting at the southwest and the southeast corners of the site should not exceed 2-foot candles. Because of
They're gonna put live oaks under those power lines?
No, actually, the buffer is behind, south of the power lines. They go closer to 98.
Okay.
Or I may have it the other way around.
You're right.
Is that right? Okay, I got it right. The only other thing is the county recently updated the CMS, the concurrency management system. The staff report indicates a proportionate fair share contribution of $273,320. That's went to $0. They've plugged into capacity of the 6th laning of Highway 98. This is in that segment of the 6th laning. So now they've incorporated that newly available capacity. Even though it's not built yet, you're allowed to do that.
When will that be built?
I'm sorry?
When is that supposed to be built?
I think construction's starting later this year because I'm pretty confident they're finished with the utility relocation. So I believe they're going to start construction this summer, I believe. So unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the requested project is consistent with Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. I request that the staff report be entered into evidence, and I'll take any questions the board may have.
Staff report's accepted in evidence. Commissioner, any questions?
All right, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Scott Jenkins with Jenkins Engineering. I think Tim did a good job of explaining the project. As you can see, we have a site plan. It's actually in between 2 commercial facilities here. It is Fountain Plaza and Miramar Plaza, so it's this parcel. There's a 100-foot utility easement here. We have wet retention in the front that's located here along these locations that's similar to what's on either side. The only thing that I would add, we did get a request from the owners of the property to the south to add a 6-foot privacy fence along that boundary, and the owner has agreed to do that, and we gave that to them in writing. Other than that, I'll answer any questions you guys might have.
Commissioners?
Thank you.
You're off the hook. We have nobody sign up to speak for this. Is there anybody who wishes to speak or address this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public comments. Commissioners?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. That brings us to agenda item number 5. This is the Casine Station PUD amendment. It's been reviewed by Bob Barante, and he will introduce this one.
Before we get started, I need to recuse myself from this, and I'll need to.
Mr. Chairman, I also had a request at the break to announce the 3 continuances again, just to make sure there was nobody here that was waiting on those 3, because there was some concern there might be somebody
Okay,
here
go ahead.
waiting. The first one was the Crossings Phase 3 LSA. That's number 1. It was continued until June 8th. The second is the Chandler large-scale amendment, which was continued to June 8th, 2017. And the third was the Piper's Place final development order, which was also continued to June 18th, 2017. So if you're here for any of those 3, they will not be heard tonight. Thank you.
Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Just like on the other case, I want to give some background on this so you're up to speed on this. If you look at my staff report in the appendices, I try to, or exhibits, I try to keep the flow of it in order so you can kind of track it from earliest to latest. What the applicant is here today is to request to amend the PUD to convert the front building, which is on would be the bottom side there, to a sit-down restaurant from a office/commercial building. The history of this building, there has been an evolving history for years over this building, and it has been a code issue for years also. What happened is when this PUD was set, it was for commercial, and then the front building that we're talking about today, it was the office sales for the homes to the north, and then next door the condominiums. At one point, after the occupancy was getting to the point where they didn't have a tremendous flow of traffic, they requested to a former director to allow to sell ice cream. They were given that okay to sell ice cream. That okay to sell ice cream / office then morphed to a pizza place, and then it is now a full-serve Mexican restaurant. Now, since the PUD amendment is that whole piece of commercial, you're going to hear some different arguments, and I want to fill you in a little bit before I turn it over on different arguments. At one point, we had a code violation to the east of the site in the first building, where there was storage of golf carts for golf carts rentals. That had been clumped in. Plus, there was legal signs, including the applicant sign that's there today, but I'll address that in a second. So the code and the planning has been trying to work with this property for a number of years. It came back, we had a meeting with the county attorney, the then director, the then planning manager, myself, and the code enforcement manager, and we tried to come up with a solution to get this resolved. So the email you see in the exhibit saying what you'll have to go back to, the takeout only, no sit down, no tables, is if you didn't follow through. So if this would go, when this goes to the BCC, and if the BCC decides to say no, he will have to go back to that. He will not convert back to the commercial or to the office. You'll also hear, so when we got that, we started talking with the applicant himself and the applicant's representative, and we came up with an idea. I was looking at the parking. When this was originally approved, it used generic general commercial, which had the higher impact. I went back out, surveyed what was truly there. We worked up the parking per the land use code, sent it to our consultant engineer. He concurred with that. We were able to bring the site's parking into compliance to allow, if the applicant went through this process and it was approved, the sit-down restaurant. So then two of the spaces, we had 4 extra spaces. 2 of the spaces we took out, and the applicant agreed, even though it wasn't his issue, he agreed to put on the plaque the 2 charging station locations because the applicant in the ice cream store across the drive internally went through the expense of adding these charging stations. We worked with them. They are in compliance today. A letter of compliance was issued earlier this month, so that is nothing we have to discuss today. And if it becomes an issue, that'll become a new violation down the road. Also, you'll hear about the second store, his beach store. His beach store is theoretically it's 2 stories, but in reality it's 1 story with storage on the top. It does not count as a story, nor does it fit into the square footage of the plan. Spoke with the chief appraiser. You see the email in there that he concurred that the appraisal site was incorrect. He fixed it. Because of what we determined square footage and they did, it's still a little bit off, but that's just because how they do our math and we do our math. But the upstairs is classified as storage. Because we have the extra parking and to make sure everything is in compliance if this gets approved, there's 1 space given for that storage. That's all is required for that storage. It's not heated, it's not air conditioned. By our code, is not considered a story. So that resolves the one issue for the parking. It's being used as bicycle storage. It's just basically framed in. There's no office up there. It's not like I said, it's not heated, it's not air conditioned. And the only access is on the side, as you see in the picture. Okay, so those issues. So now let's get back to what we're really here to talk about today. We're here to talk about Mr. Ofuto's restaurant. Now, since it's part of the PUD, that PUD would have to be amended to allow the sit-down restaurant. It has the required parking. There will now be a loading zone. Our code is silent where the loading zone has to go, so the applicant and his staff decided to put the loading zone back by where the beach store is. So that is taken care of. We have an application. If we also when we met in the meeting, and we said that since there's only 1 dumpster permitted for the PUD, and the dumpster is by the side road exiting out, that if the trash became an issue, the applicant would agree to move up service to a more frequent rate to address the traffic. So we've addressed the parking, or the garbage, We've addressed the parking, we've addressed the garbage, we've removed the garbage dump that was over by the condos. That's been removed. If this is approved by the BCC, there is a sign application waiting on Tim's desk to be reviewed. So what this PUD amendment would permit would be, you have 1 sign out there, you would have a sister sign placed basically right where the current restaurant sign is, that would advertise the businesses on this side. So the current sign only advertises for that side. This new sign will advertise for Mr. Ofuto's two businesses. Now, we've seen the sign. They have made the sign almost exactly as exact as they can with the current sign. So that was a recommendation that came out of the agreement. So Mr. Ofuto has done everything that we have asked to this point. Is it a violation now? Yes. But with the county attorney's guidance and our current director, then planning manager, we met and decided that that wouldn't be an active violation until this process went through the finish. If it's denied, then there would be a code issue. But we felt that this was a good way to address a long-standing violation, get the owner in compliance, and be able to know for the future that we have everything documented and be able to move forward. So if there was an issue with another owner down the road, this time we have clear documentation of what's permitted, what was approved, and what wasn't. Do you have any questions before I turn it over to the applicant?
I do have one. I mean, there may be more, but you say it's not in compliance currently, is that correct?
The restaurant is, but the agreement was made is taking this step, if this process was successful, that violation would go away. It's kind of just in limbo. It's not actively being enforced because the applicant did do what we asked him to do at the meeting.
I guess my question is, how do you operate or continue to operate something that's in violation?
Well, there has been many code visitations. This step would bring him into compliance. It's been a historical violation. We have the code enforcement manager here today to speak if you have any in-depth code questions. But as the city leadership met, this was the only and best way we could get them in compliance.
So long as they're taking steps to come into compliance or attempt to come into compliance, we just hold the code complaint.
How long has it been in violation?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, about 8 years.
Yeah. And once we realized
that's what confuses me. I'm not picking on you, Bob. Okay, I think you've done a great job explaining what's here in the process. My problem is understanding how something is allowed to operate for 8 years in violation, and I don't understand that.
I don't know either. But we've discovered it. We went through the process of getting this to this point where he can get him into compliance. But if you deny it, or if the commission denies it, then we go forward with the code compliance.
And then he would have to go back to take out only. It wouldn't go back to an office. It would go back to take out only, no indoor, outdoor seating, no indoor alcohol consumption.
I understand all that. I think everybody here understands that the biggest problem facing 30A in South Walton is parking. And I think that's historically been the problem here with this location.
But we have the parking
how did you create new parking?
We didn't have to create new parking. We, by the reviewing of, in this meeting, I came out, looked at the LDC, came up with the parking formulas. You see the email in my appendices that explains the parking generation. That meets the code. It was actually overparked because it was generally categories as all general commercial. We sent it to our traffic engineer. He agreed with the numbers, and that helps us. This new plan will get us into compliance.
How many parking spaces are required for this restaurant?
There are, total, there's 66 required.
For the restaurant?
No.
For the restaurant, I'm asking.
I'll give you the.
I was going to say, where is there 66 parking places?
Because I ain't seen 66 parking places there.
We have counted them numerous times.
Okay.
There are.
Right.
Okay, the commercial has a total of 8,692 square feet. It's parked 1 to 250 for other. Okay, that's what it was parked in the original. That parking was changed to general business 1 to 350, and the new requirement was 25 spaces. We took out the 1,170 square feet out of commercial, and the 1 to 250 square feet, which was the commercial parking requirement, and made it a restaurant. The restaurant standard parking per the LDC is 1 to 150. That would require, there would have to be 8 spaces in that whole area for the restaurant. We left the 33 spaces alone for the residential, so that would get you to 66 total. We use two for the parking of the carts. That takes you to 68. We changed the 2 spaces for the loading zone to 1 because that met the standard of the LDC. 1 would be used, so the 1 taken out of the loading zone would be used for the storage, and that makes the site in compliance. And it, like I said, the traffic engineer agreed.
How many tables are in that restaurant?
I'm not aware of that. The applicant may know that.
And again, the code doesn't, it's one of the things that we struggle with the code. The code doesn't measure necessary parking in a restaurant by the number of tables, but by the square footage.
By the square
of the building,
footage.
Which is.
And I guess that's where I have a problem too, Danny, because there's
Yeah,
probably
it's
more
square.
than two tables in that restaurant.
But what I'm saying, sir, is we have the LDC to go. That is our guidance.
I understand that, okay, but I guess my problem and where I was going is, I don't know, I guess I have not a problem, I have a concern with changing the use while a place is in violation to accommodate them.
But it's
And
not.
That's where I have a problem.
But it's not currently in violation because the violation is on hold
It is
while
currently in
this
violation.
administration.
How can it not be in violation if there's a violation on hold?
It is. There is no enforcement action being taken.
I understand that, because it's on hold.
Correct.
I
While
understand-
this
I
process
understand
went
that.
through the.
Okay, I understand that, Mr. Bronte. Completely understand that, okay? But just because it's on hold don't mean it's not there.
I understand.
Okay.
But those same spaces would be required if it's a takeout restaurant or a sit-down restaurant.
Okay.
So it's not going, legal and code would not make it go back to an office use. They would make it go to a, as it said in that memo, a takeout restaurant.
How does it not go back to the, how did it not go back to the office building? That's what it was supposed to be.
Because that takeout would have been considered retail, not the
Under our
restaurant.
code- Under our code, the takeout would be considered retail.
Are you saying they changed this to a sit-down restaurant 8 years ago?
No. The problem started then when it went to a.
There have been a series of violations by different folks over the last 8 years. Yes, this has been a code enforcement location, not of choice, but of necessity. The restaurant violations have occurred over the last 2 or 3 years. We approved a sit-down restaurant, a takeout restaurant there with no tables, no chairs, which would be considered general business. This development was approved in 1990 before the current comprehensive plan land development code were even proposed. It was originally approved throughout the development as 1 space per 250 square feet for all non-residential uses, which is effectively the office parking ratio. General business, which is predominant out there, is 1 to 350. It has a much less intense parking ratio. The restaurant use is 1 to 150, which is more intense. So what we did, we took a look at what the tenant mix was out there. We protected the residential parking that was originally improved, the 33 spaces there, because we can't share that with a non-residential use. We reanalyzed what the parking requirements would be as a possible remedy to correct the code violation. And we proposed modifying the PUD and modifying the uses to accommodate remedying the code violation once and for all. Because this has been an ongoing problem for the neighborhood and the county. But once we reanalyze the parking, as Bob has described, there are enough spaces to allow this to be a restaurant. So the parking is not an obstacle to the land use change.
But I think I mirror his concern. It's almost like I can go buy something and just decide what I want to do with it and then sort of buffalo the county into giving me what I want. I think that's concern 1. And concern 2 is what I've read is there's already a parking problem with it associated with this restaurant. whether some formula says that there's not, the citizens that live in this development say there's a problem, that they're parking on their yard and on the grass and all over the place. So I don't see how we can say we got enough parking when the people who live there say we don't.
No, what I'm stating, Mr. Gladwell, is that it meets the requirements of the code based on the uses that are being proposed there now. That's all I'm saying. I'm not speaking to whether or not our code requires enough parking.
And as Mr. Stewart said, well, I'm not jumping on either one of y'all. Y'all have to do what, I mean, y'all have to give us what, or y'all have to present what the code says. But apparently the code hadn't taken into account something because the people out there say there's a problem with the parking.
I guess my quick question. Going through this process of trying to redo this and recalculate and figure out how to resolve this problem, is there any point in that process where other stakeholders in that neighborhood are contacted to ask their opinion of it? Or is that even a part? I don't know if it's part of the process.
That is not part of our process.
Okay.
I think that's what this is.
We did have meetings though with the owner and the owner of the other business that had the code.
I understand that, but there's a lot of people who live there who aren't owners of the business.
Yes,
They're owners of homes.
and we have protected the parking that was originally improved for those folks that are part of the PUD where we have a mixed-use development. Retail on the first floor, and we have condominiums above that.
Okay.
There's no parking that is associated with the residential subdivision within this section of the development.
I understand that. Okay, I think the problem is, I'm not saying it's your fault, okay? I think the problem is there's a lot more people sitting down and eating in that restaurant than there are parking places available for them to park, or for the whole area commercially to park. So therefore, they're parking on residential streets. I think that's where the problem is. And it's not because your plan doesn't say there's enough parking by code. There's not enough parking, period. And it creates a problem. And it's not, I'm uncomfortable changing a land use to make someone compliant with the code. That's just.
Yes, sir, and we respect that is within the purview of this board. We merely provide you the information.
I understand that. I'm not jumping on you,
consistent
okay?
with the code, and it's up to y'all to make that final decision.
I understand what you're saying, that you're protecting these spaces that belong to the residents. And on paper, I can see where you're protecting them. But who's going to be out there when the rubber meets the road and these people can't park at their house because somebody's at the restaurant and parked in their house parking space? Protected and on paper isn't protecting the people that live out there.
Danny, let's move on. Let's not jump on staff too much because they're doing their job. And Bob, like I said again, I want to thank you for the way you presented it because it was very helpful. And I think it was very orderly.
And like I said, I point out, a lot of the letters are from the neighborhood to the north that travel through that.
Mm-hmm.
And you see in Exhibit A, before I turn it over to Dean, Mr. Davis's interpretation of the cart parking. They're registered, they're licensed, so they're like a vehicle.
I understand.
So without any further ado, I will turn it over to their representation and let them go forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ed Stanford. I'm with Core Engineering and Consulting. I appreciate your time tonight to hear this fairly complicated, but rather, at the end of the day, simple request. But there is a lot of history here, starting with a development that started in the 80s and 90s prior to our Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan being adopted. This PUD that this particular office space and retail space sits in was approved in 2003. It only sits on 1.56 acres, and of that, the applicant bought a 0.338 acre building pad and 1,170 square foot office, and that's the subject of this request.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
While we're there.
Yeah.
When he bought that, was he aware what was there and what was allowed to be there?
He bought that and believed that it was commercial and it says it within some of the documentation that was recorded with the county that it has a commercial use, okay? There are other conflicting indications that says it actually is an office commercial use, and that was part of the PUD that was adopted in 2003. It says specifically on that page right there, it says that it was a commercial office use, and it was adopted in 2003 under that Moore-Bass PUD. So,
when did he buy it?
2011. So in 2003, the PUD was approved for this 1.56 acres. In 2006, the condos and the commercial spaces on the west side of the driveway were built or completed. In 2011, my client purchased his building and a building pad, and then he completed his the construction of that building in 2014. In the meantime, he has a certificate of land use from the county that allowed him to serve pizza, ice cream, takeout. And that, we have that in record. But these are all things that get us to this point. And I'm not saying that the applicant is a land use guru. So some of these things may be very foreign to him, to be honest with you. And he did, he was part of some code enforcement issues, which included encroachment into setbacks. He subsequently removed portions of his building. I actually don't know whether he built that or whether the guy before him built it, but it was subsequently removed. It was about 10 feet of deck, and Mac and I had conversations about that in 2014. That's where this all started. Signage, he had some of the flag signs, some of the things that are not allowed as part of the 30A signage ordinances, and those were subsequently removed. So there is a history here. What it comes down to is probably what we would determine would be the parking question, which you have a right to have questions about that, and the allowable use within that. I will state this, that on the east side of the building are 7 parking spaces that were adopted in the 2003 PUD. There were 3 additional spaces that were never built, and that's currently used as a landscape island. So there are 3 spaces that could be built, and I don't know the history there. I don't know, if it was agreed upon that those were not necessary, et cetera, but in the original 2003 PUD, there were 73 spaces approved and only 70 were built. So there are 3 spaces left to be built if there's an additional parking concern. So with that, I think they did a good job of presenting this complicated deal.
Okay, anybody have any questions for gentlemen? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Daniel Ufelder. I think the planning department and Mr. Stanford did a good job covering kind of where we are. And the questions you had, the parking, I think looking at the numbers I think are what you need to look at and see if they fit, and they do fit. I know there's been letters written from neighbors that are concerned about the parking, and but the county has come up with a plan that makes sure that by the code there's sufficient parking. Like was mentioned in 1990, this was developed as a commercial area, and this is a commercial space. It's not going to go back to being an office space, so it's just a matter of, I think the county has worked hard to get it to the point where there's not going to be any confusion. It'll just clarify that this can be used as it has come to be now, because they've gotten a certificate of land use compliance for certain uses, and now the planning department, this has been, the planning department has initiated this and worked with the applicant, and I think that he's worked hard to make sure that all the concerns, all the parking is taken care of. Of course, the neighbors, there's going to be questions about, they think there's a parking issue, and but really, I think we would ask for you to look at, the numbers that the code allow for, because the parking that has been put forth, there's plenty of parking under the plan. There's actually, as Mr. Stanford mentioned, there's 3 spaces that aren't even used for parking. But we believe that this should go forward, and while there have been some code issues in the past, this is this is something that we believe is, should be moved forward, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. You mentioned the code violations. These code violations started around 3 years ago.
There was different code violations, but I think the one.
Well, I'm talking whenever they started with, when did he convert this to a sit-down restaurant?
I believe that was within the last 2 years, yeah. And that was when he had a certificate of land use approval for takeout. That's what he has now. So, and that he has been not doing the regular restaurant. He's been doing the takeout, and I guess that's what we go back to. It just does not get, but the map basically for the PUD said at that time in 2003 it was an existing office. It hasn't been used as an office. I don't know when it's been a long time, so it's not going to go back to an office. So it's just a matter of getting to where historically the county has come up with a plan where the numbers work and it can be used in the way that that we want it to be used. So the violations are he's complied with all the requests and making sure that the county has really driven this and come up with this plan, and it is the county trying to amend, but we're in 2017. You're looking at a map from 2003. At that point, there was an existing office building, and that's not.
Well, in 2003, there was a lot of things that were not on 30A that are today.
Right.
I think it's not. I mean, it's a bigger problem than just this one piece.
Right, and I think what has happened is, and I think they've done an excellent job is kind of explaining the history of how we're here, and our client wants to work with, with the community, the neighbors, and we just are very thankful for the planning department to come up with this plan, and
we have a phenomenal planning staff.
Yes, and we appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, can I point one thing out?
Sure.
Those 3 parking spaces aren't open for negotiation. One of the agreements made in that meeting with the senior staff was the concern of the condo owners next to it. As you see the picture in your packet, that they're mature trees. That was very important to the condo owners, and we assured them, and you see on the proposed plan that it says they will not be removed, so those parking isn't open for negotiation.
Yeah, we're not suggesting that, but if you look at the 2003 plan, you see that those spaces are.
Okay.
That's all. Yeah, we're just married.
That's all we were doing.
Yeah.
You sort of confused me. Today as it sits, what is it being used for? Is it a sit-down restaurant or is it
It's not as a sit-down right now.
So it's
not?
No, right now it's not.
What is it right now?
What are they doing today?
Well, but it's, in terms of today, what it's operating as, yes, it's a sit-down restaurant, but it has to be.
Who approved that?
Nobody, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's what we're, if it goes back to.
He opened a sit-down restaurant 2 years ago with no approval, and now we're
trying to change the code.
No, it was go back to a takeout. He has a approval
for a takeout.
Correct.
There's a big difference between takeout and sit down, especially for parking. If I'm driving up to the pizza place to get my pizza, I'm not going to be there very long. If I'm going to sit down and eat my pizza, I'm going to be there a while.
I understand. The certificate of land use approval allowed for takeout. That's correct. And now, in order to the parking
but it's operating as a sit-down restaurant today, and that's a violation of the code.
Well, it's as we talked about.
It's on hold.
It's on hold. Yeah, it's on hold. So I mean, but it's not going to go back. I mean, I think the issue is.
I understand.
Yeah.
Has it been on? It's been on hold for 2 years now.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think it's been on hold. No, I mean, it's
to speak to that about how long it's taken. It has been it's had other tenants in it, so it hasn't been a continuous violation, so to speak, because it has been transitioning between uses, and so a lot of that, I think, it takes a little while for code enforcement to catch up, and then. Come back. So I'm not justifying it. I'm just telling you probably why it's taken so long.
Yeah, well, usually you get a code violation, you're supposed to cease and desist and stop doing what you're doing.
Until it's correct.
And it doesn't sound like he's done that. It sounds like the planning department's worked overtime to to try to bring them in compliance, but I don't see him
listen,
doing anything.
hang on, I'm going to interrupt you because we do this. This is not unusual. If Mr. I forgot your name. Is absolutely correct. We had a number of violations. We had a number of tenants in that place. I've been here since 2014. We have attempted to get these folks in compliance through code enforcement. And remember, the purpose of code enforcement is to get the use in compliance. So as long as they were, and this is the new group, frankly, they made a commitment to us to make the application to get their use in compliance. The holdup from our perspective was parking, because we didn't think, quite frankly, in the beginning, that there would be enough parking for the use they were proposing, that they're using. So I don't want to throw the staff under the bus or the senior staff under the bus. We met and said, look, we can go down the code enforcement route, but by the time we do that, these folks could get to the point where they're here today. And by the way, you can turn it down. I mean, we asked them to do this. You can certainly turn it down, but I don't want you to think this is something that we dreamed up out of the blue. We do this on a fairly, I don't say every day, but we do this on a fairly consistent basis to get folks into compliance. Our goal is compliance.
Right.
So I want to make sure that's understood. It's not to to punish anybody.
Just move along.
I got a question for staff. When you switch this to a sit-down restaurant, I know you got the parking, you say now, but what about the road trips? I mean, does that change that in there? Because I would imagine that's an area that probably doesn't have any more capacity on 38.
You know, to be honest with you, all we did was look at the parking of evaluation, because that was our focus. If we can't get through the parking, listen, there's things we can do to mitigate traffic, but if we can't get through parking, then we can't get through even, to the next step. So if we want to talk about that, depending on how this next 15, 22 hours goes, we can discuss that.
Okay. Matt?
But we did approve a takeout restaurant there, which has a less intensity than the general office would. And we do that routinely as tenants change in centers like this. As long as the impact is less than what was originally approved, they can get a certificate of land use compliance. In this particular case, they got one for a takeout restaurant. And then I'm not sure that the applicant for the certificate of land use compliance understood that they could not have tables in there. And that may be where the disconnect is. The landlord, who is our applicant, is not completely sharing what the allowable uses are in there. And we had a number of other code violations involving other people there. So we took the approach that let's fix everything out here at once. And typically when people find themselves in violation, they ask, what do I need to do to get into compliance? And we gave them a whole list of things. And they have remedied all of those except for this last thing.
Okay.
And that's actually get the PUD modified so it can allow that use, and the impacts of that use can be considered in the approval.
Very good. Let's move on. We're going to open the public comment portion of the hearing. We have a few people who have signed up to speak. Before we get started, I do want to ask a favor of you, I guess. We still have a lot of items on the agenda tonight. We'd like to move along as quickly as possible. However, we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak. So if you would, come up and speak. If you simply agree with something other people have said, let us know that. You don't have to go through it all over again. I don't want to be rude, but like I said, it's just a matter of time, and we'd like to get through as much as possible. Okay? Charles Gibb.
Mr. Chairman, I'm representing Casine Garden, Casine Townhomes, Casine Village. If I could speak first, I'm Robert Gill, attorney for those associations.
You're an attorney?
I'm just like one, so.
Oh, man. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thanks. Actually, Mr. Chairman, I've got some packages that I think will help explain. I know Mr. Bronte tried to explain quite a few things to y'all at one time, but maybe some of the packages that will show exactly what's out there and some of the history that you're asking.
You said your name was Robert McGill?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Hang on just a second. Bob, did you move the staff report into evidence? Mr. Chairman, would you accept it?
Accepted.
Thank you. Mr. McGill, do you want this marked as Objectors Exhibit 1 as a composite?
Yes, as a composite exhibit, mostly pictures and some of the stuff that's already in your staff report.
Hang on just a second. So, Mr. Chairman, would you accept that into evidence?
I accept it.
Thank you.
All right, so let me give him. Oops.
Yeah. Just make sure she has one. Yep.
So, as I said, I'm representing Casine Village and Casine Garden Townhome and Casine Gardens Homeowners Association. My name is Robert McGill, spelled M-C-G-I-L-L. And, you know, I just want to say right off the bat, I just got the impression from the commissioners here that this didn't really kind of, I don't want to say pass the smell test, but there's something that just didn't feel right to you. And everybody out in the audience could kind of get that same impression. And it looks like what you have is a certificate of compliance for a land use that was issued, and all of a sudden the county or staff is trying to make this all fit, and it doesn't. Mr. Chairman, you asked right off the bat, you know, is it a violation? So you had a PUD that was approved in the early 2000s. That PUD said general commercial office building. And I've been around here, I know a lot of y'all have been around here long enough to know when Howard Carr was in that office building. Then when he left, Holly Doan took it over and ran a real estate business out of it. That was the business that was approved there. That was the use that was approved as part of that PUD. And the restaurant or any other business that came after that that was not an office building, it's not a non-conforming use that was there prior to the passage of your comprehensive plan. So any change in that use, you are absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. It was a violation, and it's still a violation today. And the fact that a certificate of compliance was issued for a takeout restaurant doesn't make it any less of a violation that it's a sit-down restaurant or a takeout restaurant. What it was approved for and what the PUD says is office building. Another one of the commissioners asked about, was there anything, my clients are all over here, did they get any say in any of this? And Mr. Bronte said no, there was just the people within the two owners that are running businesses at Casine Station and this restaurant. Well, one of the things that I'm going to get into and one of the things I want to show you within this is your underlying zoning land use district is residential preservation. So then NPA in your district's residential preservation. And as we go through this, one of the things that you're going to see that was required, if you're going to change this commercial use, you have to have a compatibility analysis, and you're not going to find one anywhere in any of the package or anything that Mr. Bronte or staff has provided to you. So that's out there. Mr. Chairman, you asked about, well, did you just create parking? When this was approved as a PUD, and everybody's admitted this, they've all talked about it and said, yeah, when it was approved as a PUD, it was approved as commercial at 1 unit or 1 foot for, or one use for every 200 square feet. 250 square feet, I think, was commercial. One parking space for every 250 square feet. So, yeah, did they create some parking? They did. They took it from what it was approved at and moved it over to general business. And that's in your package. That's Exhibit D. I think it's Exhibit D, that the letter that Mr. Bronte wrote to Melissa Ward and said, hey, I think I found a solution to your parking problem at a Casine Station. Let's do it this way. Not the way it was approved at 1 to 250, but let's go to a general business and make it 1 to 350, 1 space for every 350 square feet. So yeah, they did kind of create some additional parking by doing that. When you got to talking about the parking spaces that are on the east side of the building, Mr. Stanford said or Mr. Ufelder said they didn't know the history of it. I'm going to show you some of the history of that and the easement that was created there. And the easement, as we go through this, you're going to see that the easement was only for parking spaces for the benefit for the restaurant parcel, for the parking spaces that were there at the time the easement was created. That's in your package. So the 3 spaces that everybody admits that there's mature trees on, they've never been parking spaces. They weren't parking spaces in 2005 when this easement was created, and they're not parking spaces now. They're all existing landscape. That's what it is. So those 3 spaces, as Mr. Bronte said, they're not negotiable, but they're not negotiable because they never were there in the first place. There was never an easement for the restaurant parcel to look at. So what I'd like to do is to kind of step back just a second, and what I'm going to talk to you about, and then there's several residents that want to talk, 2 or 3 of them that want to address some of the issues that they have. But I want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is residential preservation, and the intent of residential preservation, and it's in your staff report that says your underlying land use is residential preservation. The intent of the RP land use is to protect, and this is right out of your comprehensive plan, and you can see this at Exhibit 2 that's in I've attached policy L1.3.2, and it says the intent of residential preservation, protect the integrity of existing residential subdivisions. And I'm here to tell you this proposed amendment to allow a sit-down restaurant in this space is not going to protect the integrity of the surrounding residential subdivisions. And several of the residents are going to get up here, and there's pictures that you have in this package that are going to show you the traffic congestion, the safety issues that are raised as a result of that, because you got to remember that Caseen Station and this restaurant are on either side of Caseen Way that feeds into an 80-lot subdivision, and I think it's 18 residential condominium units. So you've got pretty much the main entrance going in here, and you've got significant traffic congestion at this point in time, causing some safety issues. You've got parking problems, and when we get into the parking issues, I want to go through what you've got in your staff report as the existing site plan and show that, and then what is proposed. And I don't think that the parking is covered. There was a lot of just glossing over when you heard from staff and from the applicant is, oh yeah, the parking's covered. Well, it's not. And the last thing is the garbage collection and refuse. There's one dumpster, and as you'll hear from some of the owners, that's part of the Caseen Station on the other side of Caseen Way. It's part of their condominium association, and it's only to be used by them, not by the restaurant. And one of the things that you're going to get to be able to see tonight is the fact is there has been a violation, and it's been operating for at least 2 or 3 years. It shouldn't have been allowed to continue to operate. A violation's a violation. The code enforcement officer should have stopped it. But because it's been operating, you can actually see the effect with these pictures that we're going to show you and go through with you of what those violations have caused. So if you look at Exhibit 2, and I'm just going to run through it and a couple of provisions in your land development code. The RP was created, to look at approved development projects that were vested or built out or recorded subdivisions that have infrastructure in place and built out. That part of what the applicant and Melissa Ward submitted to you said, yeah, that's where we are. We're using this provision, and your staff report shows that it's RP. It says the intent of this land use category is to protect the integrity of residential subdivisions. The land use category is primarily residential with very limited non-residential uses pursuant to the special considerations in Section E below. And so then you go to Section E and look at number 2. Commercial development pursuant to E1 above is restricted to neighborhoods serving commercial, subject to the following. And one of those things, subparagraph 4, or subparagraph 3 and 4, neighborhood commercial projects are conditional uses subject to public hearings and review by the Planning Commission and by the Board of County Commissioners. Neighborhood commercial development should be required or shall be required to submit a compatibility analysis to ensure harmony of scale and character with surrounding development. That hasn't happened. If you look over on the, well, I didn't attach it in the package that you have, but section 2.0103J of your land development code discusses the residential preservation areas. And if you look at those, and especially subparagraph 2E that talks about compatibility with existing neighborhoods, says the compatibility of new development within existing adjacent neighborhoods shall be considered as part of the review of any proposal for development within the NPA district. To accomplish this, all individual project plans and neighborhood plans shall establish a specific combination and quantity of uses which relate to existing adjacent conditions and in effect preserve or enhance the desirable aspects of the existing development in the adjacent areas and ensure compatible new development. And then it goes on to list, it says the specific criteria where applicable to establish the presumption of compatibility is as follows. No new commercial or workplace uses shall be established within a 250-foot buffer around areas within the definition of residential preservation. And this project, as I went over in section J.1a, meets your definition of residential preservation area. Subparagraph 3 underneath there says the buffer requirements that are required can only be modified by the County Commission as an express part of an adopted neighborhood plan for any area within an NPA district. And then finally, when you go back over and you look at the primary uses that are allowed, it says that development within our RP areas is limited to the type of development that is shown in the approved plat or development order for the proposed area. That's the PUD that was approved when they got their development order, or when Howard Carr got his development order to start construction. And it says in subparagraph 3, non-residential intensity within the category. Non-residential uses are not allowed in this district unless part of a previously approved plat or development order. So what was approved was an office building. That's what's shown on the PUD. Not a takeout restaurant. Regardless if the county made a mistake and issued a certificate of compliance, that was never approved in that PUD. So when everybody was talking about, and y'all asked the specific questions, well, what does it go back to? I think you asked that question and said, does it go back to, and everybody back here said, oh yeah, it just goes back to a takeout restaurant. It'll never go back to a commercial office building. I'm kind of writing down, why not? That's what the PUD said. That's what was approved. The other thing is the parking that Mr. Stanford just talked about and said, well, we can get in the parking if we have to. So if you look at the very front here, and it's in your package as well, this is the layouts that are that were presented by the applicant for the PUD amendment. The first one is the existing conditions site plan, and then the second one is the proposed conditions site plan. So if we go through and actually do an analysis of the parking, you're going to be able to see that in Casine Station, there is restaurant, retail uses, the rental business that's been talked about. Those spaces, those 4 spaces add up to 6,342 square feet. Then across the way is the 38 outlet store that the applicant owns. And in the calculation that Mr. Stanford has provided, he takes only one floor of that building and puts it in at 2,350 square feet. And then you've got, in his calculations, the commercial office building that they want to move to a sit-down restaurant at 1,170 square feet for a total of 9,862 square feet. And so in that initial calculation on the first as-built site, they're showing that the total parking spaces required, and this is how it was approved, and this was the initial site plan, 1 space per 250 square feet, 39.4 spaces. The residential has remained constant at 33 spaces for a total of 73 parking spaces. And once again, they're using the 3 spaces that are on the outside or on the eastern side of the restaurant. And we might as well look at that. If you go to Exhibit 6, this is, we've kind of done the history on this and looked at this. This is the easement right here, which created the parking easement for the restaurant space on the townhome on the Gardens Townhome Phase 1 property. So you can look on the Exhibit A to Exhibit 6 there where it has the description sketch, and that's going to show you parcel 1 and 2. Parcel 2 is the restaurant, the benefited parcel, and parcel 1 is where the parking spaces were to be. But if you go back to the first page of that easement where I've highlighted it, and under grant of easement, it says the parking rights of grantees shall be limited to the parking spaces presently existing on the property and immediately adjacent to the benefited parcel. So there's been no testimony here, nothing from staff, anything to say other than that's always remained landscaped, those 3 parking spaces. And I'm not seeing anything that would say that those 3 parking spaces were ever granted to the benefited parcel that Mr. Afuda owns. So right off the bat, when you look at this parking analysis, you go back and say, there's 70 spaces that were provided, not 73. So when you go back now and look at what Corps Engineering's proposed site plan, which is the second site plan on Exhibit 1, that now, and based on Exhibit D, which is in the package that staff gave you, and that's an email from Bob Baranti to Melissa Ward that says, I think I found your solution to your parking problem out at Casine. And that solution was essentially to change it from 1 to 250, 1 space for every 250 square feet. Let's make everything general business now, 1 space for every 350 square feet, and we can get there. And it goes through, and he has the 8,692 of commercial space, which requires 24.8 spaces, and then he's got 1,170 square feet for the restaurant at 150 square feet per space for 7.8 spaces, and a total for the residential of 33 to come up with a total required of 66. So once again, he's showing that there's 73 provided, and based on the easement I just showed you, I don't think that's correct. And then all of the, and this is kind of where the rub is as far as I think just common sense looking at this. Mr. Bronte just got up here and said, hey, I sent an email before the last hearing over to the property appraiser's office, and he told me, okay, yeah, that's, the property upstairs on the second floor is not heated and cooled, therefore we don't have to count it. So when do we look to the property appraiser to tell us how to classify and count retail floor space?
I said the code doesn't require it.
Well, I'm gonna take a look at the code in just a second, because I don't think that you're correct. I think if you look at this calculations and you go look at the office building itself, not the office building, but the 30A outlet building, and you can see pictures of it in Exhibit 8, I mean, and it says, or it shows a second story. And if you use just their same calculations for the second story, that's 2,350 square feet of additional space. That's not calculated anywhere in what Mr. Stanford has given to you or what staff has given to you. So if you just add that in at one space for 250, you got to have 10 more spaces.
We're not doing that.
They get you to 76 spaces. If you go back and you look, and I've attached the parking analysis that Mr. Stanford with Core Engineering did, they used one parking space for every 250 square feet. And if you take that additional 2,350 square feet based on that, you're going to end up needing 83 spaces. So part of the rub here is let's just go back and look and see what is required when you're calculating floor area ratio. So go to Exhibit 9 in your booklet, and we're going to look at, under your design standards, calculating floor area ratio, and I've highlighted this. The floor area ratio is the relationship between the total floor area on a site and the gross site area. The FAR is calculated by adding together all floor areas of all floors and dividing this total by the gross site area. The next page has your definitions under your land development code, and that's the definition of floor area ratio. The ratio of the floor area, and that's the highlighted portion right in the middle of that page, the ratio of the floor area to the area of the lot. The floor area is the sum of all enclosed areas on all floors of a building or building measured from the outside faces of the exterior walls. The floor area includes basement areas. Floor area includes attic area only if the attic area meets the Walton County Building Code standards. So if you keep turning here and you look at this, so unless you're going to say, when you look at these pictures, and there's some other pictures that were attached that show stairs going up to the second floor, and we're going to take a look at how the second floor is being used right now. Unless you say that's an attic space, you got to count that as 2,350 square feet of business. The next thing is, let's talk about what a story is. The property appraiser still has it, even after his email, still has it as 2 stories.
Sir, he said that it would take some time to actually change the website.
Bob.
That's fine. The second thing is the application for the building permit that Mr. Afuda made, or that was made by Mr. Afuda back in 2013. It shows a total square footage of 5,332 square feet. And on that application, it shows concrete slab with 2-story wood framing building. That's the next page over. So I would reiterate, I would not depend on what the property appraiser says to determine whether or not there's a 2-story building there. I think common sense, if you look at this building and the pictures that we provided to you, and actually you can look at the exhibits that Mr. Baranti has in his package and see the stairs going up and the stuff that's being stored on the second floor and the parapet walls. It's a 2-story building. Everybody didn't get that wrong. We've attached the MLS listing. Mr. Afuda has the property listed for sale, and he's renting out, and that's Exhibit 10 is the MLS listing. So he's got the properties listed, both the 30A Outlet building and the Mi Casita restaurant building, listed for $2.8 million. And he shows a 4,820 square foot, 2-story building is what he's advertising for sale. And the second floor of that building is paying $2,000 per month, or receiving $2,000 per month for storage. So hard for me to look at all of those things and say we're not dealing with a 2-story building that's being used for, if it's being used for storage, but you can look and see in all the pictures that are here, there's bicycles and rental stuff that's there every day, and they're being hauled in and out of that second story on that building. So I would submit to you that the parking requirements need to be based on a two-story building. They should be based on what the PUD was approved at, which is one parking space for every 250 square feet of commercial space. And if you go back and look at that, you're going to see that they need 83 parking spaces. And right now, based on what Mr. Bronte and Mr. Stanford have shown you, you've got a total, and what I've shown you with the easement, so far you've got 70 spaces. You're going to hear some testimony in just a second and see a picture that's attached in Exhibit 12 or 13 that shows you can only get 6 cars on the existing area to the east of the restaurant building. All of the emails and everything in your package from Mr. Bronte to the applicant show that you got to have at least one space for our loading zone for the restaurant. And that's shown, and I've highlighted it for you on the second site plan, the proposed PUD amendment site plan. They've taken away 3 parking spaces, one for the 10 by 25 foot loading zone that's highlighted, and then 2 more parking spaces up at the front where they have the proposed cart charging stations. Those proposed cart stations, that's happening every day. Those spaces are used. So that's 3 more spaces that are taken away. So it would be our position that right now, based on the fact that those spaces are being used, with those 3 going away, the 3 spaces on the other side of the restaurant, which Mr. Bronte have said are not negotiable, which I've shown you the easement didn't even provide the restaurant space with an easement over those 3 for those 3 parking spaces. They're down to 66. So there could be 18 spaces or close to 18 spaces short. I'm going to let a few of the residents come up and talk and look at some of the issues that I raised earlier, that when you go back and look at this, there is traffic congestion. A sit-down restaurant is going to make the traffic congestion worse. The parking is it's just like you said, Mr. Chairman. As things have built out there, that's the most important thing and the most dire problem for the residents in that area is parking. And you're also going to see that this was really planned for an office space. There's nowhere to put garbage refuse, and they're having to put it right behind the building, which is not a sanitary condition, and it devalues the value of my client's properties. So thank you.
Thank you. Charles Gibb.
He's deferring to me.
Okay, who are you?
Linda Coons, president of Casino Village.
Okay. So, Mr. Gibb, you want me to take you out of this stack?
No. Absolutely not. Thanks for asking me for that.
I'll try.
My name is Linda Coons, that's Kuhns. I'm the president of Casino Village Homeowners Association. My husband and I are Florida residents and have owned our home in Casino since 2001.
Ms. Coons, were you sworn in?
I'm sorry?
Were you sworn in?
Yes.
Okay.
I represent 72 current home owners in Casino Village. In the interest of saving time, I'd like to ask that the letter dated April 12, 2017, which was submitted to Mr. Bob Bronte on April 11th and signed jointly by the Casino Village and Casino Garden boards, be put into the record regarding this matter. Just to confirm, I'd like to ask if all of you did receive a copy of that letter, so that I don't need to read it to put it into the record.
I'm looking for it. Bob's in this packet?
Yeah, it's in the package.
Okay. Which we're at? What tab?
I believe it's B. A. Yeah, A, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we do have that.
All right. I'll reiterate that our position, based upon the calculations in the April 11th letter, that the amount of parking available around Casino Station is not adequate. And I think that Mr. McGill just covered that very nicely in his comments. I also want to say that the S&D Trading Company has leased the upper floor of the Maui Waves building, creating more income-producing space for him. He's marketing it that way. And a member of the Casine Garden Board and myself went out and measured the paved parking area on the east side of the restaurant building and found it to be 54.25 feet wide. Using 9 feet in width per space, which I believe is county minimum code, allows for only 5 spaces in that area that shows up on the plats as 7. And if you include the addition of a cross-hatched pedestrian walkway, there's no way to get more than 5 spaces on that paved area, which, just speaks to the parking issue again. Mr. McGill has already touched upon the issue of the square footage in the 2-story Maui Waves building. And I would like to say that at the least, the county needs to determine through an independent assessment what size these buildings truly are, since the parking ratio is such an issue. And I've seen on the building permit, engineering reports, and even the MLS listing agreement, these buildings are shown to be different sizes. Well, what is truly the size of these buildings? That certainly has a consideration that needs to be done in regard to the parking issue. Now, the Casine PUD encompasses the village, the gardens, and the station area. And it's our position that all 3 of the residential portions of this PUD should be a part of the process in any change being made to the PUD. To my knowledge, there's been no attempt to contact the neighborhoods in this regard. It's been left up to us to contact the county. This particular building was built as a real estate office and was not designed for restaurant use. Because of that, this building is inadequate in so many ways. There's no area for a loading zone that does not block traffic on either side of the building. No spot to put a dumpster that would not be visible from either the village or the garden's entrances, and of course the parking issue. And the proposed loading zone that is being carved out of one parking space actually is quite a ways from the restaurant building. And I cannot foresee that any of the delivery trucks are going to go way down there and pull in. And in fact, those parking spaces wouldn't accommodate a semi, and I have seen semis parked in Casine Way unloading goods to go into the restaurant building. So I don't see that loading zone solves a loading zone for the restaurant itself. And when Casine Station was developed with its commercial component, no discussion was held with our neighborhood about the possibility of a restaurant use in the station area. To my understanding, it was not an original intended use in our particular PUD. Mr. Stanton of Corps Engineering stated in his letter written March 23rd, and I quote, "This is a major development order requesting to convert 1,170 square feet of office space into sit-down restaurant. So there is an acknowledgement that this building is an office building being used otherwise. Even though this restaurant is being advertised as a dine-in facility and has tables and chairs in it, which we believe to be code violation, and here's a restaurant ad that shows he's advertising it as a dine-in restaurant. If I understand it correctly, the county considers that this building can just be designated as a permitted use within a PUD, and that this process we are discussing tonight is not actually to change the zoning, but to amend an element in the Casine PUD to put this building into compliance with its current use as a restaurant, to which we object. Individual residents have repeatedly called county officials over the last couple of years regarding the many issues that exist around the station buildings. I can't stress enough that this is a through street with parking on both sides in the station area. but also the main entrance into Casine Village. I've been advised of many near misses between cars and pedestrians. Casine Way is regularly blocked by parked vehicles in the street itself. The golf carts for rent routinely stick out into the street, and people are parking within our neighborhood on Casine Way because of limited parking around the station. And our streets, by the way, are private. We maintain them. We pay to have them repaired. The village has a documented and recorded right of ingress, egress across the south end of Casine Way to 30A, which right is repeatedly violated excuse me, because of this congestion and lack of concern for our right-of-way. A sit-down restaurant with liquor sales will further increase this congestion and serve to heighten the safety issues that we have. We don't have to guess at what a restaurant use will mean for this area. On a daily basis, we are already dealing with the actual reality of the negative impact this use has had. There exist other real problems, not just access issues, trash, junk left around Maui Waves and, and restaurant buildings, but with no weed control or attempt to beautify the area around these two buildings. But most important, when Casine Way is blocked by parked vehicles, how can a fire truck or ambulance make it through? Is our safety of our residents and property of less importance to you than the convenience of delivery trucks and racks of bicycles? Owners in both the gardens and village feel that the current situation in the station area impacts our property values and hinders resale possibilities. The proposed amendment to the PUD will only serve to make matters worse. When the garden townhomes were built, and when many of the village houses were built, this building was an office. The use of this building as a restaurant was not what we bargained for, with its accompanying need for numerous deliveries blocking Casine Way and trash and garbage bags piled behind the building. Because there's just no appropriate place for a dumpster or appropriate loading zones for that restaurant. These two buildings are not allowed to use the small dumpsters situated behind the Casine Station building that is exclusively for the use of the commercial space in the station. In opposition to this change, we stand united, and we expect the county to protect our interests as owners and citizens of this county. And I would like to add that if Walton County had business licenses, we would not even be here tonight, because I don't believe a permit could have been issued for this restaurant with the zoning and the other legal restrictions on this property. And finally, I would like to present to you, and some of these pictures are going to be redundant with what Mr. McGill has put into his...
Hang on just a second. Ma'am, we would consider those objectors exhibit, composite exhibit 2. Mr. Chairman, would you accept them into evidence?
Accept them.
Thank you. Just hand them to her.
Do you have copies for the...
Thank you. And understanding there's some that are redundant. And I'll mark them.
I will explain a few of the things that you are going to see on those pictures once you have a chance to pass them down.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask Ms. Coons, since she took a bunch of the pictures in the composite exhibit that I have, if I could just go through some of those while those are being passed down, since most of these were taken by her or she has knowledge of them.
Okay.
Ms. Coons, if I could get the commissioners to look at Exhibit 7 when you go through.
I do. I don't have hard copies, but I have them.
But I was just going to ask her if y'all could look at Exhibit 7, and I know you had testified a little bit about could you tell the commissioners what Exhibit 7 is, this photograph?
Exhibit 7 is the east side of the restaurant building, and as you can see, there are 6 cars there. Currently, there's a pickup truck parked in front of the entrance to the restaurant because there's no crosshatched pedestrian walkway on this pavement. And quite frankly, that picture, although it's hard to tell because it was cut off, those cars go curb to curb. And so if you take that pickup out and replace it with the appropriate pedestrian walkway, you've got spaces for 5 cars there.
And right now, the applicant is showing 7
Yes.
spaces there, correct?
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then if you'd look at, if you want to just go through Exhibit 11, 12, and 13, and just tell the commissioners what those pictures also show.
Well, this first picture shows a Pepsi truck parked in Cassine Way, blocking the northbound entrance. It sat there for quite a while. The second picture shows a car going by the Pepsi truck. And if you look off to the right of the car, generally that is where the golf carts are parked for rental. And one of the pictures that you're looking at that's loose in my photos that I just gave you shows how the golf carts routinely sit out into the road right-of-way. If they had been there that day, that car probably would have had to squeeze by this Pepsi truck. Certainly no fire truck or emergency vehicle could have gotten through that point.
I'm going to ask you if you would to try to wrap up. We got a lot
Yes.
of people here and other items on the agenda.
Yes. You can see from the pictures, there's one of the emergency
In that
vehicles.
same exhibit, you can see the
You know,
emergency vehicles using.
Yeah, we can see the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then you've got, and then Exhibit 12.
the trash can
Right.
that's overloaded.
Understood.
These are all issues, and the garbage that sits on the ground behind the restaurant building. These are all things that we see and deal with every day.
Yes, ma'am.
And it gets old, I can tell you that. So as far as the owners of the village are concerned, we very much object to this building being used as a restaurant, and especially do not want it turned into a sit-down restaurant, even though apparently it's doing so in violation. So thank you for your time.
Mitchell Taub, I would ask you,
I will hold it to a few moments,
please.
Commissioner Stewart. Ms. Barante, we owe you an apology. You were given a project that had no thank you to it. Commissioner, we owe you an apology because the owner of this property, if he had done what he was supposed to do, we'd not be here discussing this issue tonight. It was an office building long before he bought it in 2011. When he bought it, he decided he could make more money doing something else. And so it suddenly became a restaurant, first an ice cream shop, then a pizza place, now a full-blown restaurant. Gentlemen, I'm going to be real short and to the point. I'm a speech pathologist with this school district. I deal with laws, policies, rules, regulations every day, and we're required to follow them. Gentlemen, it doesn't fit. It's real simple. The dumpster, it doesn't fit. You can't put a round square in a peg, a square in a peg in a round hole. Parking, it doesn't fit. You can't put the square in the round hole. Loading, unloading, it doesn't fit. You just can't make it work. Gentlemen, we shouldn't even be here. It should be an office space. There's plenty of opportunity to rent office space. Davis Properties, right across the street, built a beautiful office space for real estate. If the owner had done what he was supposed to do, we could be on to number 6, number 7, number 8. Thank you for your time.
Lois James.
I live in Cassine, and I think if you have your little ditty bags there, I did I live within 300 feet of this project, and I did send a letter to the planning department. And the only thing I want to add is I live within 300 feet. I am the second house going north from the Cassine area, in the residential Cassine village. And yes, they park in front of my house. Yes, I had a gas truck, a gas repair truck, and he came out and he put orange cones all around it. I couldn't get out of my driveway, and we don't have gas lines in my community. So we know he did it. I left him a note, but we do have those problems. And I wanted to say I've lived there since early 1994, and our problem started with this applicant and his merchandising and his ambition. And it has been a restaurant, an active restaurant. Code enforcement is well aware of it, has been well aware of it. And what we did, I wanted you to tell you that we, in 2015, the community actually empowered the board to look into gating our community in order to avoid this problems. And when they looked into it, we didn't have enough property to do it in the right place, and the fire chief was really not too happy at all. So we didn't do that. So in 2016, among our residents, we billed out at 72 and we're a few short. We passed an informal petition with our objections, and we said if we got 50 or so, we'd make a formal complaint. We very quickly got more than 50, and we made a formal complaint to Mr. Williams. I have a copy of that complaint if you would like it. We did copy to the Sheriff's Department. They had conversation, made some recommendations, and code enforcement, we never got an answer of any kind. And that's all I have to say. If you'd like a copy of our thing, I'll give it to you. If you have enough paper, I won't.
Thank you, Mrs. James. I appreciate your time. Mr. Gibb, you gonna keep it brief, right?
I'd just like to thank you for your time. I'm a resident of Cassine Village. I'm also a board member, treasurer of Cassine Village Homeowners Association. I've lived there since 2003. And we do have a problem. It's a serious problem because what's missing from the discussions, we talk parking spaces, we talk fiddling the numbers, making it 1/350 instead of 1/250. It's great, you can make the numbers fit, but the realities are different from the numbers. The realities are that people park there who are going to the beach, as well as going to the restaurants and the businesses, because there is no beach parking around. So folks just go and say, hey, I'll go and grab my ice cream, leave my car here, go down past one Seacove Beach and spend the day at the beach. That's never been discussed here. It's a serious problem. Congestion is a problem. I personally have had 3 very near misses. One, which was probably a 5 or 6 year old child, who decided to fall off her bike in front of me. It's a real, it's an experience. So congestion, parking, you can dress up whichever you like, but this is more than just a congestion problem. It's more than just a parking problem. Why don't you make it 1/450 or 1/550 and make the numbers fit so this guy can sell his stupid building for $2.8 million? That's what it's about. It's about money. It's not about the residents who live here. This is about somebody making a buck and building another business someplace else. I will thank you for your patience and your time. I promise you to keep it short.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have nobody else who signed up to speak. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, we'll close the public comments.
The applicant's at the top.
Yeah. Applicant?
We've heard what people have said, and there's obviously the neighbors don't want it. There's neighbors that don't want it, but the issue is is it compliant with the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code? And the planning department has presented in the numbers and the situation, and that's what we're here to determine, whether it's compliant. And this is a PUD that had it identified as in 2003 as a existing office. It has evolved over time into something else, and now we're simple. The numbers really, people don't want to talk about the numbers; they want to talk about other things. But that's what the Land Development Code is there for: is to provide certainty and to provide a way, a roadmap for people to know that if they do something and if there's a way to make it work, then that can be done. And we can go through the second story building. That is, the numbers have been run. That is storage. It's not heated and cooled. I mean, the numbers that have been prepared by the planning department they're accurate. I mean, they're completely accurate, and it provides for more than enough parking for what is being requested here. And this, we believe that the county, this has been a 2-year process. I've come into it recently, but it looks to me like the county has done what they're supposed to do, and they've looked at the plan, they looked at the circumstances, they looked at the parking, and they've looked at a way that it can be done. And this is, people who live in this community, they live in a community that is a commercial community. It's not just a neighborhood. When they bought into this community, there's all sorts of commercial uses that are going on in this. It's a commercial center in large part, and this is simply a matter of making sure that the 1990 recording said that it was commercial. 2003, it was existing office, and now it's involved into something that is has been created. The situation with the numbers that can be.
Let me ask you a question. You said you used the word evolved, and I don't disagree that that's what it's done. It's evolved.
Right.
Can any parcel along 30A evolve into whatever it wants to be, and then come in here and ask for a change?
No. Well, the county was during this process. There was certificate of land use compliances that were issued along the way that to allow for something beyond a general office. So it wasn't just a unilateral evolving. In 2013, 2016, they've got several certificate of land use compliances that were issued for general business, ice cream, pizzas, takeout. So I mean, it wasn't that this was done in a vacuum. And yes, there was violations, and that's for the past 2 years. The applicant has tried to work with the county to make sure that they can come into a way that's.
Has there ever been a certificate of compliance for a sit-down restaurant issued?
That's why that's the issue. That's why we're that's what we're here.
And does it currently operate as such?
Yes, that's why, and it's yes.
So unilaterally, somebody that's made a decision to put a sit-down restaurant without a certificate of compliance. That's the only interpretation you can make.
And for the last 2 years, they've worked with the county to see in order to with the numbers, the parking would allow for that. And that's
so to go back to Mr. Stewart's point, can anybody on 30A just buy them a piece of property and then just say, well, we're going to put a whatever in that? Can I put a racetrack?
No.
And where do we stop?
I completely understand, and I don't think that's what here. This was a commercial development, in that in 1990 this was a commercial space. 2003 there was identification of it just simply says existing office. That's all it says. So, yes, but
would you agree that there is a wide gulf between a office building and a sit-down restaurant?
I would say, based on the way the Land Development Code and the plan are to be implemented and interpreted, that you have to look at the numbers, that if it complies. And if the numbers comply based on the calculations that the county provided, then I think it should go forward, because it is different, yes, but the calculations that were prepared for the circumstances, there's plenty of parking. That's so it complies with the code. That's our position.
Does he own the place where the golf cart rental? Does he own the, do they rent space from there? And, I mean, they got their golf carts out in parking spaces that obviously shouldn't be there, so.
That's the other, that's not him, that's the neighbor.
So that's probably another code violation, isn't it?
I think they've noted that that's been taken care, I mean, from what I heard earlier, that's. It's in compliance, yeah.
They can park in the parking spaces?
There's two, I
That's
think.
street legal.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, but it's their inventory, it's.
In Appendix A, you'll see a interpretation from the county attorney that defines the difference between parking and displaying vehicles for rent.
Okay.
Seems like a gray area.
Yeah.
I tried not to make it great.
It's just our
All right.
position. Okay, we thank you for your time, and we ask for you to approve this and adopt what the county has spent 2 years and a lot of hard work putting together, and I think it's a good plan. I think it's a fair plan. Not everyone's going to be happy, obviously, but we think that the plan allows for this, and that's really what this is about.
Thank you.
very much.
Okay. Commissioners?
Question for staff?
Yes, sir.
All right. If this thing is not approved, you already have a solution to go into effect, right?
Yeah, it goes back to a stand-up takeout, doesn't it?
A takeout restaurant without seating is approved there. We've issued a certificate of land use compliance. If this land use, this proposed amendment to the PUD does not seek approval or receive approval at the BCC, they will have to revert to that.
Thank you.
They could also revert to an office.
Okay. Any other commissioners?
I have one more.
Board closed public comment.
At some point, you have to stop this kind of stuff. At some point, people have to get approval. The two things we've heard tonight, both of them are the same thing. You do stuff and then you get approval for it, you think. At some point, people have a right to their property values, to have a certainty of what is going to go in somewhere. And if something's supposed to be an office building, that's not the same thing as a restaurant. And I believe the testimony of the objectors was compelling, that there's not enough parking spaces there, regardless of who calculates what. The visual showed 5 cars. So based on the totality of the evidence, I make a motion we deny.
I will second that.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. We're going to take a quick 7 minutes. We'll be back in here at 8 o'clock to wrap up. We'll call the meeting back to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, Lot 2 Coastal Business Center. Request to approve a final order, and Tim Brown is the project manager on this. He will introduce the project.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a major development order application submitted by ECM requesting approval to develop a 7,000 square foot warehouse building on 0.52 acres with a future land use of light industrial. It's located on the north side of Commercial Parkway east of Goldsby Road. It has a proportionate fair share contribution of $7,480. And unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the requested project is consistent with the Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. I request that the staff report be entered into the record, and I'll take any questions the board may have.
Accept into the record. Commissioners?
Question?
Yes, sir.
Just go over, if you could, why is this a major development?
Because it's over 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
That's the demarcation between small and a minor and a major.
Thank you.
That was too easy.
Yeah.
You can't come up with a tougher question than that?
I could.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Talty, T-A-L-T-Y. I have been sworn, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
I know, it's pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Thank you.
See? This is item number what?
6.
6. We don't have nobody. Okay, nobody signed up to speak on this. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Commissioners?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you.
That was the fastest one of the night.
Yeah.
Okay, item number 7 was continued. Number 8, let me ask you.
That brings us to item number 8. This is the Fox Lake Residential Subdivision, request approved by final order. It's being reviewed by Rita Benagnati, and she will introduce the project.
Good evening, Rita Benagnati from the Planning Department. I would like to enter my staff report to evidence. Fox Lake Residential Subdivision. This is a major development order application submitted by Emerald Coast Associates, consisting of 79 single-family homes on a little less than 30-acre parcel. The project is located north and east of the Santa Rosa Gulf Coast Golf and Beach Club, Dune Island Beach, and it's a low-density residential land use. This project came into the planning department in 2006 with a site plan that assumed that some right-of-way abandonments will go through, and the internal roadway is going to be private. That right-of-way abandonment did not get approved, so they went back and they redesigned the site using those right-of-ways, the public right-of-ways for their private roads, and that's when they came back to re-permit the subdivision. We have a number of public comments, most of them included in your packet. The rest of them were put on your table. We received them in the last few days. A couple of planning comments that we have is, since the internal right-of-ways remain public, based on our discussion with the legal department, gating of those roadways will not be permitted. Currently, the site plan shows gating of the subdivision. It appears that the south entrance, there was a lot of discussion whether or not they need to have the south access road. Originally, the site plan proposed a large enough number of residential homes that the fire department required a secondary entrance. Since they redesigned, they reduced that number. The secondary entrance now is not required by the fire department, but they still propose it. Based on our research, they have legal access through the residential road, Bunker Place, and the government pattern easements. The fire department gave us a new review. Previously, they did not like the curves, the radiuses on the road, but the new design seems to satisfy the fire department. And the majority of our outstanding, well, not necessarily the planning department, but we have a lot of public comments, and we just made aware today that the mailing of the public notices were sent out within the time frame that was required by the code, but for some reason, a lot of the residents did not receive the notifications, and that's just something that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, that for some reason it appears that it was a mail delivery issue, but there's a lot of notifications that were not delivered.
At all?
At all, as of today, yes. They mailed it out on time. They met the code requirement, but for some reason they were not yet delivered.
And we can show that they were not delivered.
Not shown as not deliverable, but shows as the post office did not even get
Did not
to the
even take
point
them
of
out.
trying to, yes.
Mr. Davis, how do you, I mean, obviously, if they did what they're supposed to do, you
Yes,
can't fault
they did.
them. But you also
Exactly.
can't,
The applicants met the requirement of the code. The question becomes, I mean, if the staff is thinking that might be a reason to continue the matter until the next meeting, you certainly have discretion to do that, but just understand that the applicant has met the
I understand that the applicants met the
But it appears-
requirement, but it concerns me that the residents weren't notified, even though they made the required effort to do so.
Yeah.
I mean, it is,
What numbers are we talking about? Do you have any idea? Just curious.
As of today, more than 50% was not yet delivered.
was not delivered?
Yes.
I have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm. I think.
And I don't, it's not y'all's fault, I understand that, but you can't fault it's hard to do that without.
I think it's going to give them a right to challenge
I
anything
think
that
it
happens
would
here.
create a problem if we went forward.
I mean, legally, I don't know that it does, because they met the requirements of the code, which is mailing. Now, you certainly could take a position that you should continue it for lack of a better word, fairness reasons, but legally, they've met the terms of the code.
I understand legally, but there's a difference between what's legal and what's right.
Or fair.
Yeah, or fair. I mean, that's where I have a problem.
Who would they sue? The post office?
Now, let me ask you
That's
this,
quite
if we were to continue it, they wouldn't be required to notify, to notice again, right?
No, sir. No,
So
sir.
their notice requirement will be met.
Would these things get delivered by then, or you don't know?
You don't know that.
We don't know. We'll probably need to contact the post office to try to find out what happened. The last information on those letters are dated April 28th, and they are in Pensacola, so
They're
they
in
have not
Pensacola.
moved. That's
Wow.
And they were mailed April 28th?
April 26th, yeah.
26th.
We're not public comment, Bob. I would recommend we continue it. I just don't feel comfortable moving forward when the residents have not been
You might want to hear
properly
from
notified.
you might want to hear from the applicant before you have a motion.
Okay.
Do you have any questions to me?
Not right now. We'll be ready to come back if we need you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is William Dunaway. I'm representing the applicant, and I thought probably best to address the issue of notice, because if we're to have an issue with notice, the board does, then certainly we would want to have that taken care of. I guess the question that we would ask, or the applicant would ask, is that you indicated that you had a good number of people who were here to speak. Might you actually ask the folks who are in the audience, a good number of them from the affected areas, just to kind of get a sense? This is a pretty well-informed group, and make your determination based on that. From a legal standpoint, we're comfortable moving forward because we've met the legal requirement. But you have to make the decision as to the fairness issue. And then I just ask if you just ask those.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and understand that this group is an informed group. But if you can show, if 50% of the notices have not been delivered, I mean, the group that's here may be all in agreement on one thing. The 50% that didn't get it, or maybe even one of those 50% that didn't get the notice, may have a completely different opinion, and they have a right to be heard also. That's just that's how I think.
So the only thing from the standpoint of the applicant is that, as Mr. Davis said, from a legal standpoint, we've met our requirements. So we're comfortable moving forward such that there wouldn't be a challenge as far as that goes. And you do have a lot of the public here who are in.
And let's be clear, if you do choose to continue it, there will be no further notices. The continuance.
This is it.
The continuance would be the notice.
That's
In
right.
other words, there'd be no second mailing.
I agree.
And we don't know if, right, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you shouldn't have to do it again. But I think in fairness to those people who live there, they have a right to be notified and have an opportunity to be here.
But they're not going to get notified. It sounds
Let
like
me
that's
ask a
it.
question about that. Matt, does the sign change when we continue them? I can't remember.
You know,
Typically, the sign does not change. We usually ask the applicant to update that just for, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Once we know that the sign is out of date. But we have no legal requirement to require them to.
Right.
But we strongly encourage it.
Okay.
Don't you ask some of the audience if they're aware if everybody, if this was talked
But
about?
they can't answer for people that didn't get notified. I understand, I said, they may all agree on one thing, but if there's one person who lives there that didn't get notified, who has a different feeling, that person deserves the opportunity to be heard also. I mean, that's just how I feel.
You want to continue?
That's what I would prefer to do.
I make a motion, we continue.
To June 8th.
To June 8th.
To June 8th. We have a motion and a second.
I'll second that.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Hudson, you want to say something?
Just for the record, my name is Bob Hudson, H-U-D-S-O-N. The people that you're talking about, I don't believe they know exactly how many have not been delivered because they don't know how many have been delivered. I went to the post office today, and I also called and talked to Pensacola. Those letters are never going to be delivered. They are lost.
Well, I'll feel more.
So all I'm saying is, if you're continuing saying the letters are going to come and those people are going to be notified, ain't going to happen.
At least the opportunity was there. Item number 9.
Somebody's post office ought to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 9 is Jamira Commercial request.
Hang on a second.
Give us just a minute.
We're still in a meeting, folks. We're still in a meeting. If you're not in part of the meeting, see next, please.
No, we'll get this fun one. You don't have to worry about it.
It's y'all's problem.
I just think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we
Well,
don't know
changing
that.
the sign would help though, but
Yeah, we might want to get them to do that.
yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Item number 9, Jamira Commercial request to approve by final order. This project is reviewed by Bob Barante, and he will introduce it.
Good evening. The next project is Jamara Commercial. This is a major development order application submitted by Jamara Enterprises Incorporated, requesting to develop a 2,370 square foot retail restaurant development on Scenic Highway 98. And the project is located on .52 plus or minus acres with a future land use of neighborhood infill. We've worked with this applicant for over extended amount of time to get to, especially get to the conditions of approval. So we've done a lot on this. I will turn it over to the applicant, but first I'd like this to be read into the record. Entered into the record, and I will turn it over to the applicant. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy Jernigan with JP Engineering. We're the agent for the property owner with this development. It's a very straightforward development, and just in the interest of saving everybody some time, it meets the land development code, meets all the requirements, even above and beyond a lot of the requirements, especially in stormwater, where we are retaining a 100-year storm event with zero discharge. It's a pedestrian-friendly development. It's not intended to be any type of sit-down restaurant or anything else. It's just right on the bike path, right on that pedestrian path for bicyclists, pedestrians to be able to walk up and basically they're kiosk-style vendors. Maybe
Like trucks or, I mean, or just
no, these
kiosks?
would be permanent structures.
Okay.
And those architectural plans should have been in your package. So these will be permanent structures. The tenants may range from ice cream vendor, caricature drawers or whatever they might want to put in there, but we should meet all the land development code requirements. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? You got lucky.
I know. I'll take it.
You bet. Okay, we have one person signed up to speak, Laura Wiki. Okay. Thanks for the help on that.
I'm used to it. Never spoken in front of you all, so hi, I'm Laura Weehee. I live at 2000 Scenic Gulf Drive.
Were you sworn in, Ms. Wiki?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Number 7, I'm in an owner-occupied townhome, and I've been there since 2005. And I forgot something that I left over here, sorry. I bought my unit originally because it had a Gulf view. And I knew that this lot was in front of me. I knew it wasn't mine, that I have no control over it. Although I'd like to show you some pictures if you'll see them. They have, we built a survey pole. So you'll see my boyfriend, who's 6 foot tall, right in front of our 6 foot tall fence. And then we have a pole going up 20 feet, which if these buildings are placed in a certain spot, are going to directly affect my property value. So,
Do you want the commission to have those?
Yes, yes, that'd be
Why
great.
don't we hand them to the clerk here, and we'll mark them as objectors, exhibit number 1.
Yeah, I should have brought more, sorry.
That's all right. We can look at them. Yeah, accept it.
So, I think also when I was looking at the package that I received in the mail, which is essentially this, I think to the north it said that the lot to the north is vacant, which is not true. That is the Summer House Townhome Common Area, which is all a part of our property, which I'm a part owner of. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then I also wanted to find out what the zoning NPA-IF means. That's what they say on the plan.
That would be neighborhood infill, and that's the reason this development is here tonight.
And what is exactly does that mean? Is it completely non-residential?
It can be non-residential or residential.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we live in a quiet neighborhood despite being surrounded by lots of vacation rentals. We kind of have this little piece of paradise right across the street from the Gulf. And I believe that this project is going to create excess noise, add artificial light that's going to be visible from my home, encourage loitering in the pavilion. I'd like to know more about the pavilion and what that is going to be set up for. And then essentially, of course, take away my Gulf view. So I'm interested in knowing more about the pavilion, the proposed restaurant. Are they going to serve alcohol? What are the hours of operation going to be? Is it going to be, I believe I heard you say there's not going to be a sit-down restaurant, but I'm still interested to know if, what proposed restaurant is going to be there. And again, if they're going to serve alcohol, what are the hours of operation? Are they going to allow bands? I mean, it just seems pretty loose as far as looking at it from the limited information that I have.
Okay.
Also interested in the lighting, the exterior lighting. There was a new project that went in recently, which is just to the west of this project. And they have about a 20-foot light, incandescent light, that's super, super bright. And when you're standing on the beach at Pompano Joe's, I'm surprised that the light passed and was in the project because the light is so bright. It looks like the moon when you're standing on the beach in Pompano Joe's. So I'm hoping that we can talk more about the lighting. And the traffic. The traffic at Holiday Drive and Old 98 is a mess. That the stop sign there really is so congested in the summer, and if individuals are going out of this project and trying to take a left or go east, to that stop sign, that's going to create even more havoc with our traffic. So those are kind of the big things. I would also request, if this goes through, that they put a 6-foot fence to abut next to our fence, because I'm sure that eventually their parking and our fence are going to meet and possibly create damage. So I'm asking if they would put up a fence also. So I'm interested in hearing more about the restaurant bar, a fence maybe on the north end, and then the height restrictions. I have no idea. These are supposed to be 1-story buildings, and it says that there's a max height of 50 feet.
Well,
so I'm curious.
I don't think it'll be 50 feet.
Yeah,
we'll let the developer answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever she gets done.
Sure. So I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
You bet.
To answer mainly, I guess, the building first. These are not intended to be tall buildings, and I can certainly understand having your view. We have a similar situation where I live. If somebody develops, moves in behind us, then we lose a view. Also, it's not my property, so I just kind of have to live with that. But it is a beautiful view there. My office is right down the road, so I travel down Scenic Gulf all the time. So I'm pretty aware of that situation. The buildings, they're basically just small kiosk style buildings. So it's not going to be anything tall. We showed 50-foot max on our plans because that is the limit by the land development code. As far as the traffic, this is really to generate pedestrian business. It's not going to be something that's going to draw people. It's just not intended for that. What uses go there are a little bit unknown at this point. If it's going to be a hot dog stand, ice cream shop, it could be any of those uses that would be permitted in there. I don't believe alcohol is, I don't even know that would be permitted in something like that. But I don't know. It's not the intention of the owner to have alcohol in there. There are some conditions on what can be performed or what activities can take place in the pavilion, and there's no music. The hours of operation, there's not going to be a late night venture. Basically, once it gets dark, and I don't know that the hours have been specifically set yet, but that concern did come up in our community meeting that we had, and the owner did state that it's not going to be a late night noisy type of development.
I'm guessing you'll be there to capture the foot traffic on the beach during the day.
Exactly. A lot of that traffic from, that's traveling east and west to get, down to the beach. Mm-hmm. That's the perfect traffic to capture.
How far is that from the regional beach access?
It is just to, I don't know if that aerial will show it. It's
just to the west.
Maybe a quarter mile. Yeah. I'm guessing maybe a quarter mile, if that. And then the intersection that she was speaking of, you can actually see on that where Holiday Road is right there beside, it's in Alvin's Island, I think, is the existing commercial use there. Mm-hmm. And it does, like I said, I travel that road, so I can understand that. But we don't really have a traffic generating use here. And we did do all the, traffic reports, traffic studies to show what trips are being put on the road. So we've met all of those requirements, and it's just not.
What type of lighting do you have out there?
We have a photometric plan. We have 0 candles at the lot line. So, obviously if they're high and you're standing under them, you're going to be able to see them. But the intent was to try to make sure we were down to 0 candles at the lot line,
mm-hmm.
as well as turtle friendly lighting. So.
And if you could go over the landscape plan.
Yes, sir. That was the other thing. There is To the north and to the east of us, there's already existing privacy fences, 6-foot privacy fences. If you notice the landscaping plan that was in that package, it's a pretty extensive landscaping plan that goes around the perimeter. So I think that adds a lot of buffer, and there's no way that our parking is to the rear of the buildings, but we have landscape buffers, 20 foot, in fact, between all the residential uses to the north and to the east of us. There's no way our parking can encroach. Our stormwater retention area is off the backside of that parking.
Right.
So we provided us what we feel is a ample amount of screening in the form of landscaping. I think it's 90 some odd plantings around the perimeter.
And those canopy trees, will they actually be taller than these kiosks?
I suppose once they get mature, I would certainly think so.
Okay.
How many kiosks are there?
There are 3 buildings, but they will be 8 individual little units in there.
Yeah.
Total building square footage is, about twice as big as this room, so it's not very much. For it to be a major development on a half acre.
All right.
And I don't know if that addressed everything.
Is the pavilion going to be open air?
The pavilion, let me just briefly talk about that. It will be open air. The sole purpose in that is just to provide shade. We did identify some seating in there just in case somebody does walk up, take away food or bring coffee, whatever. So there is some seating in there in that pavilion that's defined as seating area. But it will be an open air pavilion.
Okay.
And part of the conditions, just to reiterate that in the development order conditions that staff has recommended was, no live music, no public venues, nothing like that that's going to, be a nuisance.
Oh, come on, man. I want to come there and see Bon Jovi or something, man. All right.
Do you have any
I don't
other
have
questions?
any questions. Commissioners?
I'm good.
How tall are the buildings exactly?
It looks like,
So the solid line right there,
yeah,
10 feet.
10 feet.
10 feet.
So, maybe by the time you put your.
But they are allowed there to go to 50 feet.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
14 or
they-
15 feet, I would imagine,
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
I wouldn't think it'd be more than 15 feet, honestly.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just point out, because the questions that were raised very quickly, the conditions of approval.
Yes, please.
Really limit what can be done in the pavilion.
Right.
No flea markets, no music, no canned music, no. So it was very restrictive, even their display areas. We limited them to 1 display area per site and per store, and that's all we ended up.
Yeah, y'all did a good job on the restrictions.
Thank you.
We disagree.
Everybody's not going to be happy. Okay, any other questions? Anybody else wish to be heard that didn't sign up to speak? Okay, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Commissioners?
I move we approve this.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We have one more item, I believe.
Before we start that, Mr. Aber, do we have those pictures from the,
Right here.
two, yeah, those. I just need to make sure the clerk has them.
Well, that's what we can do on that.
Thank you so much. This is the sign.
Crowd's getting thin, Mac.
I know.
It's getting late. That's why everybody's leaving.
This brings us to item number 11, the distillery. This is lots 18, 19, and 20 of the South Walton Commerce Park. Request to approve a final order, and Bob Barante will introduce this project.
I'll quickly hit on this for you. This request is by Lone Palm One LLC, requesting approval for 18,000 187 square feet of office/warehouse. The project is located from the intersection. It's in the Commerce Park. The future land use is business park, and the total acreage is 1.447 plus or minus acres. It meets the comprehensive plan, and I'd like to enter the report into record.
Accepted.
And I'll turn it, if you have no questions for me, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Commissioner?
No questions.
You got it.
I'd just like to say, bless your heart, you've had a rough night.
It was fun.
I'm glad.
Had a firing squad, huh?
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Nash. I'm with O'Connell and Associates. We're the agent for this project. There's not a lot to say. It's 3 lots in the South Walton Commerce Park. They were combined because of some interesting lot areas out there, and it's meets the land development code. We've met all the planning staff's comments and feel like we've satisfied them sufficiently. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, any questions, Apple?
Yeah, I got one. What is Lone Palm 1? If they just got one palm, why do they
You
need
got
that much
me.
square feet?
You've got me. I just write on there what they, what the sun says it is.
You don't know what the actual business is?
I do not. These are
Just
these are
curious.
planned to be office warehouses, and this is I believe they're a real estate company, but
You know, there's no sit-down restaurants, though, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
No.
All right.
They could probably do it out there and nobody would complain.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Public comment?
We'll open public comments. We have nobody that signed up. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing none, the chairs are all sitting out there. We'll close public comments. Commissioners?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We have one additional business item.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioners. As you know, we're moving through the process of, with our consultant to reconcile the comprehensive plan and land development code. We have the first 4 of those elements under review right now, and we'll begin the public workshops of those next Monday. But we'll need to bring those to the Planning Commission. We can either bring those on a regular meeting night, or we can have a separate meeting just to review those 4 elements at your pleasure.
I would think that it's probably appropriate to have a separate meeting just for that. Just
You think they're gonna take a while?
Well, they might.
Yeah.
We've been briefing the commissioners this week. It's probably been, our briefings have been running about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
And that's without any public comment.
right.
Oh, yeah.
You think we'll have public comment on this, Mark?
Yes, sir.
Come on.
And we
I would recommend we do a separate meeting.
that would probably be a good idea.
Do you have any dates available?
We have some dates. Yeah, possibly the 13th, which is a Monday night. Our Thursday nights are pretty booked up with other other
June
meetings.
13th
June.
is-
Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday?
I'm sorry, Tuesday. I now have Monday nights off, and I'm quite happy about that. So those are available for y'all.
The 13th, what time?
I'm gonna be out of town starting the 13th, but the 12th would be good.
The 12th is open.
12th is a Monday.
In the evening or during the day?
Yeah, we would need to do this during the evening because these are legislative items that we're considering. They have to be after 5 o'clock.
I have a meeting, but I may can get out of it. Regular schedule meeting.
I bet you can get out of it, Lee. I know you.
Normally I
You
would.
can be persuasive.
Yeah.
I would say that, I mean, that would work for me, the 12th.
Monday, the 12th at 5 p.m.
5 o'clock.
in this location.
Yeah.
We'll need a motion to set a special meeting for that purpose.
I make a motion, we have a special meeting for the purpose of discussing the comprehensive plan changes on June the 12th at 5 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion, we have a second?
I will second that.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll make the necessary advertising arrangements.
Very good.
I wish we had more tonight, but that's all we
Start at
got.
5 o'clock.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we go, we need to recognize the fact that this is Mr.
Oh,
Davis's last meeting and extend our appreciation for all he's done.
Yes.
I'm sure Mr. Carpenter will join us in that.
Yes, sir, and this will be my multiple opportunity to do that.
I'd have known all the crowd was gonna be gone before I'd have done it first.
Yeah, we'd probably be in jail if it wasn't for you.
Mark, I do appreciate your assistance over the years and enjoyed working with you. Wish you the best.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate all the time.
You gonna be on the other side now?
No.
You don't wanna represent?
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stand adjourned.
Let's go home.
I'll tell you what, we earned our keep that time, didn't we?
We did.
We need a pay raise.
Oh, you almost had 3 contentious ones in one.
Yeah, we can talk about Casine Station for a little bit more.
Yeah,
We usually get, well, yeah.
Hey, I hope y'all know we wasn't jumping, I wasn't jumping on y'all.